The moment of trauma, the shattering. You remember the break, even if not in detail. But something inside you shifts, almost silently. This is where the story begins, not in the hurt, but in what the brain dares to do next. It doesn't begin with a scream. It doesn't even begin with pain. It begins with stillness, a breath held too long. Something happens. Something changes. And though the world outside may look the same, something in you does not. The moment of trauma is rarely a clean break. It is more like a slow, widening crack in a mirror. 1 second you're whole, the next your reflection bends in ways you don't recognize. Your voice sounds distant. The light feels colder, sharper. You don't even know you're breaking until the pieces begin to separate. And even then, you're not sure which part was the first to go. Your brain, quiet and constant, notices everything. Even when you cannot name the moment, your brain logs it, catalogs it, marks the fracture like a page in a book. This was before. This is after. Some call it survival mode, but your brain calls it emergency architecture. Instantly, it begins rerouting energy like a city after an earthquake, diverting power away from what no longer works. Emotion, memory, connection, all pause as your mind braces itself. You may feel numb, or too full, or nothing at all. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is protecting you by pulling everything inward. Even now, you may not remember the moment clearly. That's part of the design. The brain doesn't always record trauma like a movie. It records it like a storm, blurry at the edges, sharp only in flashes of sound, scent, or sensation. You might remember a shoe, a word, a shadow on the wall. Tiny details your conscious mind finds strange, but your nervous system never forgot. This too is survival, because the full weight of pain all at once would shatter the system completely. So instead, your brain lets it in like water, slowly, carefully, until it finds where the cracks are deepest. But here's what you must know. This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. The crack in the mirror isn't just damage. It's an opening. It allows something new to enter. Space, air, change. What feels like breaking is actually the first step in rebuilding. And your brain, tender and tireless, knows how to rebuild. Even as you ache, millions of neurons whisper to one another. They do not ask why this happened. They ask, quietly, what now? In the days after, you might find yourself staring, lost in thought, with no clear thought at all. This too is healing. It is your brain recalibrating, trying to make sense of the unspeakable. It does not rush. It does not judge. It waits with you. It listens for patterns, waits for safety. And when the time is right, it sends out its repair signals, small like lanterns in the dark. The journey ahead is not fast, not linear, but it is real. And it begins here, with one neuron reaching for another, somewhere in the quiet, as the mirror shifts, as the pieces tremble toward new arrangement. You begin to sense that this pause, this space, holds something sacred, a threshold, not of forgetting, but of becoming. You are not alone inside your mind. It is not a silent cavern, but a place of work and wonder. The machinery is slow and often invisible, but it never stops. Even in the stillness, your brain is building a new path. It doesn't erase the pain. It simply makes room beside it for something else to grow. And as the first signals begin to pulse, delicate and unsure, a question begins to rise from somewhere deep within the circuitry. What happens to the storm when the body begins to calm? The body stays still, but the mind is lightning. After trauma, something stirs beneath the surface. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't flash its name. But inside your skull, a cascade has already begun. Your brain has entered the storm. This storm is chemical, a flood of cortisol, of adrenaline, of signals fired at speeds you can't feel, but which change everything. You may only notice the effects at first. Your heart too fast, your stomach clenched, your breath forgetting how to be soft. You are not broken. You are responding. Your body, your brain together are reacting to a world that changed without warning. Trauma rewrites the chemistry of safety. Your brain, shaped by millions of years of survival, launches into what it knows best: protect, alert, survive. This is the storm in the synapses. Tiny gaps between neurons become torrents of electrical chatter. Messages once calm now scream through. Those spaces, telling the body to stay tense, the eyes to stay wide, the sleep to stay away. You may feel detached, as though you're floating above your own thoughts. This is the brain shielding itself, not giving up, but buying time. In the amygdala, your fear center, old instincts awaken. It sends messages faster than logic can respond. To run, to hide, to freeze. Even the hippocampus, your memory weaver, takes in fragments, not full scenes. The past, present, and future blur, as the storm turns time into static. But inside all this chaos, there is something miraculous, because the brain isn't only reacting, it's adapting. New pathways begin to form, like roots spreading through disturbed soil. Some will lead nowhere, some will branch toward healing. But all of them mean one thing: the brain is still trying. Think of a city hit by sudden blackout. Emergency lights flicker on. People reroute through unfamiliar streets. That's what your neurons do, rerouting signals through detours, looking for new ways forward. These detours can feel strange. You forget simple things, react to small triggers with large emotion, cry when you didn't expect to cry, feel nothing when you should feel everything. It's not wrong, it's recalibration. The chemicals flooding your brain, norepinephrine, glutamate, and others, aren't signs of damage. They are messengers. They are there to sound the alarm, to begin the rewiring. Still, the storm takes its toll. You might find yourself exhausted by moments that once felt effortless. You might feel like you're living in a different body, slower, heavier, or humming with invisible static. This too is part of the response. It's your nervous system trying to find the balance between too much and too little. And through it all, your synapses, those small, silent gaps, remain alive with activity. They're not waiting for healing to come from outside. They are becoming the healing. Each electrical pulse, each release of a molecule, is your brain's quiet whisper: we are still here. We are still learning. In some ways, trauma reveals how adaptable you are. The storm does not destroy, all it reshapes. Some circuits may burn out, but others become stronger, more resilient, more responsive. Like a tree struck by wind, you may bend, but you do not break without growth. Eventually, as days pass, the chemical surge begins to slow. Not all at once, but gradually, like weather settling into still air. Your breath returns. Your sleep comes in flickers. Your body begins to ask, is it safe to soften now? And in this question lies the turning point. The storm fades, but its imprint remains, not as damage, as the blueprint for what comes next. Because, in the absence of constant lightning, you will begin to feel something. You almost forgot the silence between signals, the quiet place where healing first finds its rhythm. You lie awake in the hush that follows lightning. Your chest rises, settles, rises again, and the air feels newly fragile, as though the storm has sanded every edge of sound. It is not the brittle silence of shock, nor the hollow silence of giving up. It is a listening silence. Your whole nervous system leans inward, ears pressed to its own chambers, waiting to hear what remains. Inside the skull, electrical chatter drops to a murmur. Synapses that shouted a moment ago now trade cautious glances. Ions drift like soft rain instead of bullets. Cortisol levels ebb, calcium gates close, and the temperature of thought lowers by a hair. You might mistake this stillness for emptiness, but emptiness is absence. This is presence, condensed and quiet, like fog collecting in a valley before dawn. Picture a concert hall after the final note. Musicians lower their bows, the audience holds breath, and the echo rides the rafters until even memory of music goes. Transparent, that pregnant pause is where your brain now dwells. Electroencephalograph needles would trace slow waves, theta alpha rolling like a distant tide. Beneath them, glial scaffolding waits in shadow, ready to step forward when the crowd disperses. During the storm, your world shrank to reflex. Now it widens, millimeter by millimeter. Blood pressure eases, pupils soften. The vagus nerve sends tentative reassurances to heart and gut. You feel them as small permissions, a jaw unclenching, fingers loosening, a sigh you did not know you held. Each is a semaphore, signaling that resources may be redirected from defense to repair. Yet the mind is cautious. Evolution taught it that threats can return without warning, so the amygdala keeps one lantern lit, even as it dims others. You may find your gaze scanning corners, your hearing tuned to distant engines, the smell of rain sharpening memory you cannot place. Vigilance lingers, but it is background noise now, not foreground alarm. In this interim, neurons perform an inventory. Axons damaged by toxic stress are marked for pruning. Dendritic spines that bent under metabolic weight decide whether to spring back or surrender. At the synaptic cleft, vesicles float like unopened letters. Some will be delivered later, some will dissolve into the void. Molecular custodians note each change, filling invisible ledgers. You participate without noticing. A single, deliberate breath modulates carbon dioxide, alters blood pH, nudges cerebral arteries to widen. Extra oxygen bathes cortex and limbic, lobe alike, fueling mitochondrial repair. No conscious command required. Inhalation becomes instruction, exhalation becomes release. With every cycle, gears click one notch toward balance. Scientists call this phase the refractory period of stress activation. It is the lull that permits plasticity. Genes governing growth factors awaken B, DNF, NGF, writing new recipes in nuclear script. Protein factories ramp up, but slowly, so as not to jostle fragile networks. In imaging labs, researchers watch glows of transcription bloom like lanternfish in deep water. You, here in bed, simply feel a settling. Memories, once scattered, like leaves in gale, begin drifting into piles. Some cluster in hippocampal corridors, awaiting sorting. Others bury themselves in cortical archives, faces down, for later retrieval or deletion. You dream lightly, though you may not yet be asleep. Micro-dreams flash, a corridor that bends wrong, a voice half heard, a color with no name. They are your brain's test patterns, calibrating projectors before the night's full cinema. The default mode network those midline circuits that knit personal. Narrative re-engages like lights coming up dimly in theater aisles. It asks gentle questions. Who am I now? What just happened? How do I place it on the map of self? Answers need not be verbal. They may arrive as warmth in the chest, or a tilt of the head, or an impulse to pull the blanket higher. Story, like moss, grows quietly in the dark. Outside laboratories, people speak of numbness. But numbness is not lack, it is latency. A seed in winter appears inert, yet biochemical symphonies unfold beneath its shell. Likewise, your quiet brain orchestrates prelude to growth. Potassium channels reset thresholds. GABA whispers lullabies. Two frantic circuits, microglia, patrol like librarians, turning out lights. Order, tentative and patient, tiptoes back. You may notice time stretching, seconds feel wider, minutes softer. This temporal dilation is real, with stress hormones subsiding, internal clocks recalibrate, the striatum keeper of intervals resets. Its pendulum, you sense space between heartbeats large enough to rest a thought upon. Into that space, awareness pours like cool water. Listen closely. Amid the near silence, faint rhythms persist, the basso continuo of blood. The distant treble of cerebrospinal fluid pulsing through ventricles. These songs have always played, but only now, with the noise dimmed, can you hear them. They are reminders that life never fully pauses. It only changes tempo. In some cultures, healers prescribe purposeful stillness after shock, sitting beneath trees, watching shadow drift, allowing wind to write on skin. Neuroscience agrees. Immobility is not idleness. It is the milieu in which homeostatic plasticity assesses deviation and sets new gains. Like a mixing engineer balancing track levels, your brain nudges synaptic weights toward harmony, of course. Stillness can discomfort those accustomed to noise. You might feel urged to scroll, to pace, to fill the hush with anything recognizably busy. But every external distraction taxes neuronal resources that could be repurposed for mending. When you choose quiet, when you cradle the silence, rather than escape it too, donate metabolic coins to the treasury of recovery. Notice how even now, reading, your eyes perform microsaccades, tiny leaps that prevent photoreceptor fatigue. Muscles minute as spider silk flex and release. Healing is never total rest. It is balanced motion, yin to the storm's yang. This oscillation activity, activity, reposes the cradle in which new wiring knits. As hours pass, consciousness drifts like a boat on slack tide. You hover between wakefulness and sleep, a liminal estuary ripe for reconfiguration. Electrochemical storms gave way to calm seas. Soon the moon of deep sleep will raise waves again, sweeping metabolic debris from neural shores. But not yet. First, this silence drinks starlight. Cracks left by trauma outline new shapes. Vacancies become passageways. You begin to sense possibility, though you may call it relief or dullness. Either way, opportunity hides in the hush. The question shifts from what is broken to what can grow here. In laboratory glass, wounded neurons extend tentative Philopodia finger-like projections, feeling for contact. They do so in darkness, in nutrient broth, guided by gradients of guidance molecules. Your brain, cushioned by cerebrospinal fluid, enacts the same dance. But before Philopodia stretch, there must be space, The silence makes that space. Some signals will never return. Not every lost synapse revives. Not every memory threads back into the loom. Accepting this is part of the quiet. In absence hangs sorrow, but also permission to inhabit a mind that is changing and yet still wholly yours. Loss, here, is not vacancy, but invitation. Gradually, neurotransmitter reservoirs refill. Serotonin peaks over edges. Dopamine rehearses its first applause. These are not celebrations, yet merely scouting parties, testing the atmosphere. Their tentative presence tells capillaries to relax, tells glia to ready raw materials, tells you, faintly, that hope is chemical as much as philosophical. If you place fingertips upon your diaphragm, you will feel its rise like sunrise, its fall like dusk. Each cycle clears carbon shadows from alveoli, delivers misted oxygen to neuronal furnaces. Respiration becomes conversation, body speaking to brain, brain answering with variable rhythm. This dialogue will guide the next phase, active renovation. For now, your task is simpler. Stay within the silence, notice its layers. Hear the slow drip of cerebrospinal fluid draining metabolic dusk. Sense the ionic currents resetting thresholds. Imagine astrocytes unfurling delicate end feet round capillaries, ready to feed the awakening circuitry. Silence, once feared, becomes collaborator. It gathers fragments of experience like beads on string, laying them out for later weaving. The loom will appear in due time, carried by caretakers who rise when the hush is deep enough, when the debris is charted, when the blueprint is sketched. You are not there yet, but you will be. For even now, faint footsteps approach, soft, methodical, determined. They belong to the brain's gardeners, custodians clad in microglial skin and astrocytic cloaks. They carry tiny brooms of enzyme and vacuum sacs of lysosome, ready to sweep and reseed. They wait just outside the silence, respectful of its necessity. Soon they will step forward and work will begin in earnest. But this tranquil interval remains vital, the breath between question and answer, between wound and weave. Rest here a moment longer, listening for their arrival. Let every exhale widen the chamber where repair will unfold. Feel the quiet settle around you like cool moss on stone. Think of astrocytes as night shift lamplighters who wander cobblestone alleys, trimming wicks so dawn can find glow. They regulate potassium, recycle glutamate, release lactate like breakfast. Trace 4 tired neurons. Meanwhile, microglia patrol like gardeners and guards combined, pruning synapses gone brittle, swallowing molecular wreckage, whispering cytokine instructions to those still standing. Even oligodendrocytes, weavers of myelin, wait in alcoves with fresh rolls of insulating ribbon. All of this is scheduled to unfold when silence is deep enough, when metabolic lanterns confirm the storm has truly passed. Until then, every quiet second is investment. Each heartbeat deposits glucose coins. Each slow blink cools overheated circuits. You may not feel progress, yet beneath your notice, inventories are balanced and scaffolds erected. So linger. Let eyelids hang like velvet curtains. Let thoughts drift without anchor. The caretakers will need the stage cleared, lights dimmed, audience hushed. Your willingness to rest is an offering they cannot fabricate. Soon you will feel their work as warmth behind the eyes, as dreams of sweeping and mending, as waking with a shade less weight on the chest. That will be evidence. For now we stay with the hush, cradling the promise that quietly grows within it. Listen, and you may sense faint rustling softly beneath thought. You rest within the hush that arrived after the storm, and now almost imperceptibly another presence enters the scene. They do not carry torches or sound alarms. They glide, they breathe chemistry. They are the glial cells, the unseen caretakers of your neural garden, and this quiet moment is their appointed hour. You may picture neurons as tall trees alive with sparks, but every forest needs soil makers, seed spreaders, guardians of balance. Glia are all of these at once. While neurons broadcast thought like birdsong, glia attend to the undergrowth where life renews itself. They are smaller than fame implies, yet they outnumber neurons nearly 2 to 1, creating a soft scaffolding that cradles every synaptic branch. First come the microglia, patrol officers turned gentle custodians. They roam with flexible arms, searching for fragments left by the lightning of trauma. A torn membrane, a ruptured vesicle, a protein folded, the wrong weight is noted, gathered, sealed inside enzymatic pouches. Under the microscope they appear like drifting jellyfish, but their mission is precise. Dismantle danger before it festers into inflammation. As microglia work, they release whispers of cytokine, chemical language that tells blood vessels to tighten or relax, cause lymphocytes, if invasion threatens, and signals astrocytes to prepare comforting bomb. You seldom feel their dialogue consciously, yet you might name it as the ache that gradually subsides, or the warmth that replaces cold shock in your temples. The easing is evidence of microglial diplomacy. As follow, star-shaped and generous. Their arms wrap around capillaries, drawing glucose, oxygen, and ions from crimson flow. They convert these gifts into lactate, a midnight snack for weary neurons, and store extras in branching glycogen granules. Where trauma scorched the synaptic earth, astrocytes lay down a thin mat of extracellular matrix, not to imprison but to protect like gauze over tender skin. They also mop excess glutamate, that fiery messenger which in surplus sears tissue. With delicate pumps they ferry the molecule into their own bellies, convert it to glutamine, then offer it back later in softer amounts. This is nourishment disguised as housekeeping. Beneath their care, neuronal fire transforms from wildfire to candlelight. Farther back in the shadows wait oligodendrocytes, loom weavers of myelin. When signals slowed during the storm, some axons lost their insulating coats. Oligodendrocytes collect the shreds, recycle lipids, spin fresh wraps, and fasten them around axons like warm scarves against winter. As insulation returns, electrical impulses regain speed, thought regains smooth cadence, and you experience it simply as clarity inching home. Though glia differ in form, they share one rhythm. They move more when you move less. Your choice to lie still and breathe grants them the uncluttered stage. Each slow inhale raises CO thresholds, dilates vessels, feeds their metabolic engines. Each soft exhale lowers sympathetic noise, so signaling molecules travel without haste. Rest, therefore, is not absence of healing. It is invitation. Scientific instruments reveal glial dance in fluorescent color. Microglial tendrils retract after debris removal. Astrocytic calcium waves ripple like moonlit water. Oligodendrocyte nuclei brighten when new genes for myelin engage. Yet the subjective correlate is subtler. Shallow nap that feels deeper than hours of ordinary sleep. A faint pulse in the skull as circulation adjusts. A sigh that seems to empty more than lungs. Sometimes glia build what researchers call a glial scar, a mesh that partitions severely damaged zones. You might sense it as numbness around memory or emotion, a protected clearing fenced off until conditions are safe. Scars are not sentences. They are boundaries, marking where future growth must detour. Over weeks the mesh will thin, sprouting pores through which axons may trespass in cautious optimism. Consider the poetry here. The brain heals by adding cells that do not speak an electric language, yet make electricity possible. They are silence, becoming structure, hush, becoming harbor. In forests, moss cushions, roots. In oceans, coral shelters, fish. In brains, glia cradle, possibility. All ecosystems rely on caretakers whose names do not headline songs. You may wonder how such microscopic labor manages the enormity of lived pain. The secret lies in numbers and time. Millions of microglia can clear a cubic millimeter overnight. A single astrocyte enfolds tens of thousands of synapses, sensing each flicker, adjusting ions like a conductor balancing chords. Oligodendrocytes extend arms to multiple axons, knitting a quilt of speed across distance. Healing is a cooperative orchestra rehearsing in the dark while the audience sleeps. Meanwhile, hormones of stress continue their gradual decline. As they drop, astrocytes release more brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the growth tonic that encourages dendrites to branch again. You might translate this as the moment colors look kinder, or music feels less sharp, or a memory once jagged begins to smooth. Such psychological shifts are biological gifts wrapped in glial effort. Glia also talk to the immune system beyond the blood-brain barrier. Vesicles filled with microRNA drift from astrocytes into circulation, carrying updates about cerebral status. Peripheral cells adjust inflammation accordingly, demonstrating that healing is not local but body-wide. Your relaxed shoulders, your settling gut, even the way your skin warms under blanket, they all triangulate with glial signals to weave comprehensive mend. Because glia never rush, you might misinterpret slow progress as stagnation. But think of snowfall layering one quiet flake upon another until mountains transform without thunder. So too does astrocytic glycogen accumulate. Microglial pruning refine networks. Oligodendrocytic myelin thicken. The pace respects fragility, ensuring repairs hold when storms inevitably test them again. If a stray thought tries to hurry you gets better now. Notice how glia ignore it. They answer only to molecular clocks and feedback loops older than despair. Your job is simpler. Provide consistent shelter, adequate nutrients, regular sleep, gentle motion, and moments of intentional, quiet. These are the currencies glia accept, the votes you cast for recovery each day. At dawn, cortisol will lift again, as it should, to wake cognition. But glia will keep working through sunlight, adjusting to circadian cues. They shrink a bit during deep night, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to wash between cells, rinsing metabolites away. Then, before you wake, they swell back to brace synapses for action. Even your dreams may be shaped by their cleaning schedules. Montages thrown onto the screen while custodians vacuum aisles. You might ask why textbooks once called glia merely nerve glue, dismissing their agency. Science, like all stories, evolves. Today we know glia can learn, remember, even influence mood. Experiments show astrocytes releasing D-serine, a modulator that fine-tunes memory circuits. Manipulating microglia alters social behavior in mice. The caretakers, it seems, also participate in conversation. In trauma recovery labs, Researchers explore medicines and therapies that coax glia into pro-healing. Phenotypes, omega-3 fatty acids that dampen microglial reactivity. Mindfulness practices that shift astrocytic gene expression. Aerobic exercise that stimulates oligodendrocyte precursor cells. You are not a passive recipient. Your lifestyle is a form of pharmacology administered every moment. Tonight, let's practice such medicine. Breathe slow, invite parasympathetic tone. SIP water, offer hydration. Recall a safe image, signal glia, the threat has waned. Each act pulls chemical levers they recognize. In response, they accelerate debris clearance. Extend nourishing arms, with thicker insulation. And you, feeling none of the micro work directly, feel instead a drift toward ease you can only call lighter. As minutes fold into hours, neurotransmitters find new equilibrium. Glutamate and GABA strike fresh balance. Serotonin tiptoes. Through raphe, dopamine sends gentle postcards from the ventral tegmentum. Glia oversee these diplomats, ensuring no single molecule dominates the parliament. Governance through moderation, that is their political genius. Eventually, you may notice curiosity waking a sign, the protective gardeners sense safe season. What if this curiosity grows into exploration, into learning? That will require neurons to stretch, to forge connections where none existed. Glia are already preparing soil for that planting season. Their final task tonight is subtle. They secrete molecules that loosen perineuronal nets, the lace that restricts mature plasticity. By softening these nets, they grant neurons permission to reshape. Tomorrow, Chapter 5 will open on that plastic potential, on rivers carving new courses through the canyon of experience. For now, remain in the gentle rustle of cleaning crews. Hear the faint swish of astrocytic arms, the soft clicks of microglial jaws, the whisper of fresh myelin unfurling. Imagine lanterns of calcium light passing hand to hand along shadowed corridors. Trust that every flicker means progress, even if consciousness cannot translate the code. Stay still a little longer, letting caretakers finish their rounds. The garden will soon be ready for planting, and the first seeds of transformation already tremble just under the soil. If you could peer inside, you would see collaboration at every scale. Microglia flash signals to astrocytes through purinergic sparks. Astrocytes answer by changing potassium clouds that drift around neuronal roots. Oligodendrocytes eavesdrop, deciding where speed is most needed for tomorrow's thoughts. This symphony is quiet but relentless, proof that life finds cadence even after discord. Researchers sometimes record the low electrical hum of glial calcium waves and translate it into audible sound. The result resembles distant chimes or a soft tide swirling pebbles, a lullaby composed by cells you never consciously meet. Imagine falling asleep to that internal music, knowing it is written for your recovery alone. Soon these caretakers will step back, tools in hand, and survey a cleaner landscape. They will leave small markers, biochemical signposts that tell newborn neurons where to grow and veteran circuits where to reconnect. Then the stage will belong to plasticity itself, to the grand rewriting that turns scar into scaffold, fracture into fresh possibility. And when dawn colors the inside of your eyelids, their quiet work will be ready. You rest in the freshly tended clearing the glial gardeners have made, and for a while you simply breathe. Yet beneath that quiet soil, change has already begun to swell. The fracture that once felt like ruin is turning into architecture. This is neuroplasticity, the brain's quiet art of reshaping itself. using breakage as blueprint, turning loss into latitude. Plasticity always starts with absence. A synapse fails, an axon retracts, a familiar circuit suddenly goes dark. The void is frightening, but nature despises emptiness. In rivers, a landslide diverts water into raw rock. Flow searches, nudges, erodes until a new channel opens. So does electrical current within you. Your neurons sense the drop in communal chatter, the way migrating birds sense a gap in wind. Silence is invitation. Proteins assemble, receptors migrate. Growth cones awaken like seedlings in thawing earth. First, chemical scouts survey the damage. Calcium pulses ripple through dendrites, mapping territory where spineheads once sparkled. These pulses instruct dormant genes to wake, build here, reinforce there, dismantle what no longer serves. Within hours, transcription factors slip into cell nuclei, transcribe blueprints for cytoskeleton, membrane, receptor. Messenger RNA ferries those plans to ribosomes that sit like potter's wheels along the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Bead by bead, amino acids click into filaments that will become the physical thought of tomorrow. You do not feel this workshop directly. You feel it as an ache to learn, a flicker of curiosity, a sudden softness around memories that used to pierce. Those sensations are translations of molecular carpentry tau, proteins repositioning rails, actin twisting like ivy to support new budded spines. In laboratories, fluorescent dyes reveal the dance. Filopodia extend, retract, extend again, as if practicing steps before committing to the choreography of recall. Yet growth alone is not enough. Plasticity must also prune. Imagine building a new path through forest. Fallen trunks are cleared, but lianas that strangle young saplings are cut back as well. Microglia, having finished their debris patrol, switch personas, releasing factors that mark weak synapses for removal. They are both gardeners and judges, ensuring that only connections which fire together belong together. You experience this as forgetting that feels merciful, the edge of a voice fading, the smell of fear no longer vivid. Space opens. The world breathes easier. Crucially, plasticity is particular. It does not rebuild the past exactly. It listens to present needs and future hopes, shaping circuitry to match the life you are stepping into. If your healing path includes new music, the auditory cortex thickens in regions tuned to melody. If it includes talking therapy, Broca's and Wernicke's areas sprout extra vessels, hungry for oxygenated insight. Attention reshapes tissue. What you hold gently in awareness becomes invitation for synaptic congregation that the hippocampus serves. As foreman, it receives streams of context. Where am I? What time is it? Who is safe? And decides which experiences deserve long-term residence. After trauma it once encoded, it now appraises new memories for themes of safety and resilience. Each night, during slow wave sleep, hippocampal sharp wave ripples replay fresh sequences into cortex, planting diversifying seeds. You might notice dreams where old fear landscapes morph into wider vistas, or where once threatening figures appear smaller, more human. That narrative shift is synaptic. Story is structure. None of this is haphazard. Molecular gradients guide, axons like lanterns along dark roads. Netrin beckons, semaphorin repels, epherin orchestrates, layered stacking of sensory maps. The result is functional elegance, a rerouted circuit that carries emotion away from limbic quicksand toward prefrontal shoreline, where thought can breathe before action. You feel it the moment a trigger arises, and, instead of spiraling, you pause long enough for choice to slip in. Plasticity also recruits myelination. Oligodendrocyte precursors follow neuronal activity, wrapping fresh sheaths around the axons that practice most. Like paving frequently traveled roads, this speeds signals, shortens reaction time, and makes the new pathway feel natural. What was once deliberate counting breaths, naming feelings becomes reflexive calm. Repetition is the price of smoothness. Practice is payment in electrochemical currency. Hormones contribute to as cortisol ebbs. Aromatase within neurons converts residual androgen signals into gentle estrogens that foster synaptogenesis. Oxytocin released during safe touch binds to receptors along the amygdala, damping its alarms. Even immune molecules IL-10, TGF-beta shift from pro-inflammatory to reparative tones, encouraging astrocytes to secrete heparan sulfate proteoglycans, a scaffold where new axons anchor. Biology is polyphonic. Every system hums a part. From the outside, change looks subtle. You take a different route to work. Seek softer music, taste food with a dash more pleasure. Inside, millions of brand new spines blink with excitatory possibility. Plasticity is why recovery can feel sudden after months of plateau. The network reaches critical mass, and a once difficult task crosses threshold into ease. Yet, neuroplasticity has perils. Circuits grow in the direction of use whether or not that use is kind. Rumination sculpts highways of worry. Avoidance deepens trenches of isolation. That is why mindfulness, therapy, art, and play are not luxuries, but steering currents. They aim the river toward fertile valleys instead of deserts. You guide them with attention, repetition, and gentleness, the triumvirate that tells neurons, settle here. This garden is tended. During this chapter of healing, timing matters. Studies show that enriched environments introduced soon after injury magnify sprouting, but overwhelm introduced to early floods the field with conflicting cues. Balance is the architect. A session of focused piano practice followed by silent tea. A courageous conversation followed by sunset walk. Stimulation and rest alternate like inhalation and exhalation, pumping nutrients across synaptic SEEDBEDS. Genetics provide the toolkit, but experience wields the tools. BDNF gene polymorphisms may slow or speed sprouting, yet lifestyle can up BDNF expression 20-fold. Sleep consolidates. Exercise fertilizes. Novelty waters. Even merely visualizing a skill sparks measurable dendritic growth, the brain rehearsing choreography ahead of muscle. Imagination is a greenhouse lamp, plastic. Reshaping continues for life, though it is most vigorous in the wake of fracture. That window is precious. In some ways, trauma reopens a developmental critical period, granting a second chance to edit foundational maps. You might sense childlike wonder returning, a readiness to rewrite stories once etched in stone. Handle that softness with mindful care. It will harden again into new strength. All the while, glia remain partners. Astrocytes release thromospondins that instruct nascent synapses to mature. Microglia whisper C1q tags that encourage pruning of redundant links. Oligodendrocytes sense local field potentials to decide which axons earn thicker coats. The orchestra plays on, but now the melody is growth, day by day. Networks aligning toward safety amplify vagal tone, slow heartbeats, widen peripheral vision. You catch more colors at the edge of sunset, hear subtler harmonies in rain. Awareness expands because limbic centuries no longer monopolize bandwidth. Prefrontal diplomats write longer memos, contemplating nuance instead of binary threat. Decision becomes dialogue, not decree. Plasticity is also social. Conversations provide multisensory input, facial micro-expressions. Prosody, shared laughter driving synaptic convergence between partners. Healing, therefore, ripples outward as your circuits calm. You model calmness that tunes others, whose responses reflect back safety, enhancing your own remodeling. This biosocial feedback loop is resonance, and it thrives in families, friendships, therapeutic alliances, communities. Connection is both fertilizer and trellis. Eventually, the scaffolds stabilize. Proteins cross-link. Peroneuronal nets tighten a bit. New spines mature into mushroom heads capable of long-term potentiation. The river delivers water smoothly along its updated bed. Memory of fracture remains, but it is context, not cage. You visit it like a scar, proof of hurt, proof of healing. Here, at the edge of chapter 5, you sense a burgeoning capacity, not only to feel safe, but to act from that safety, to choose new endeavors. Plasticity has paved roads enough. Now, the journey can extend into fresh landscapes. Yet before exploration, another process must finish its quiet labor. The mapping of the self that rides on those networks' identity. How does the updated circuitry translate into the story you tell about who you are? The brain turns inward to rewrite maps of personhood, reassembling fragments in coherent order. That narrative task awaits under the watchful eyes of circuits. Still settling, the seeds are planted. The sprouts push upward. Soon they will weave into the tapestry of self. Consider the pianist relearning a beloved piece after injury. At first, each finger hesitates, mapping foreign territory on ivory keys. Yet with mindful repetition, cortical hand maps bloom, corticus tracks synchronize, cerebellar timing refines. Within weeks, the melody returns, colored by nuance the old rendition lacked. Likewise, your daily rituals, tying shoes, watering plants, reciting morning affirmations, scales for the symphony of ordinary life. Every practice session thickens connections. Movement itself hastens plastic change. When legs walk, sensory feedback from soles to somatosensory cortex echoes like drumbeats in a parade, instructing parietal lobes to replot body schema. Gentle yoga, tai chi, even paced breathing provide rhythmic inputs that entrain oscillations, promoting coherence across distant hubs. Functional MRI reveals default mode, salience, and executive networks coupling more harmoniously after such embodied practices. You translate this harmony as moments when thought, movement, and feeling line up like constellations finally recognized. Nutrition to rights code. Omega-3 fatty acids slip into neuronal membranes, rendering them flexible. Enough for spine motility. Polyphenols in berries upregulate Krebs, boosting learning. Zinc tunes NMDA receptor currents. Magnesium steadies them. Antioxidants mop free radicals released during high metabolic drive of growth. To sip tea, crunch nuts, savor dark leafy greens, is to supply bricks, mortar, and paint to inner builders. Even light shapes wiring. Sunlit mornings calibrate circadian genes in suprachiasmatic nuclei, aligning hormone pulses with daylight, optimizing windows when BDNF peaks. By choosing to greet dawn, you nudge timing of protein synthesis that stitches new memories in hippocampus. In doing so, you weave the cosmic rhythm of sunrise into the microarchitecture of recollection. Perhaps the most radical act of plasticity is forgiveness. When you release clenched narratives, prefrontal inhibition of amygdala output increases, facilitating extinction of fear traces. This neural quiet permits ventral striatum to signal reward at the prospect of social trust, encouraging further approach. Forgiveness is thus synaptic gardening. It pulls invasive roots of resentment and leaves sunlight for saplings of connection. All these forces converge until one morning you notice delight rising before vigilance, or you catch yourself laughing, without the echo of dread. That moment is not magic. It is mathematics' billions of weighted sums across hidden layers of cortex, producing a new emergent property, ease still. Questions hover. If circuits can be rewired, who then is the I? Doing the wiring. Where does identity rest when foundations shift? To explore this, the narrative must move from synaptic geography to cartography of self into the realm where personal maps are drafted, revised, and lived. That journey awaits just beyond the sprouting edge of plastic change. Breathe, feel pathways. The map waits. You lie beneath a ceiling of quiet neurons, aware that something fundamental has shifted. The frantic repairs of the early days have slowed, and in their place rises a quieter labor. Cartographers at work in candlelit rooms, redrawing boundaries and trade routes inside your skull. You can almost sense their quills scratching. The old map, the one that once told you where joy lives, where danger waits, where memory sleeps, has become unreliable terrain. Roads end in ravines, bridges lead nowhere. Towns you trusted feel strangely distant, and yet the blank spaces invite exploration. Dot mapping is an ancient art in biology. Long before words, migrating cells followed gradients of chemicals, leaving trails you can still read in the folds of cortex. Now, after trauma, those trails must be updated. Neurons that lost their partners send out exploratory filaments, tasting the extracellular air for hints of company. When they discover like-minded neighbors, they anchor, creating a fresh town square of possibility. You feel this as a faint sting of novelty, a hobby catching your interest, a flavor seeming brighter, an idea knocking softly at midnight at the same time. Regions that once dominated conversation grow quieter. The amygdala, having blared alarm, for weeks slowly lowers its flag. In functional MRI studies, its firework bursts dim. The prefrontal cortex, seat of reflection, brightens by a few compelling lumens. Although you never see the scans, you notice their narrative in everyday choices. You pause before reacting. You listen longer. You decide from curiosity rather than fear. That pause is space, and space is the blank paper on which the new atlas is drawn. But cartography requires more than ink. You need landmarks. The hippocampus supplies them, stitching context to feelings so you can say, "Here I felt safe," or "There I learned something valuable." After trauma, this structure sometimes hesitates, unsure whether to trust its own compass. Cortisol once soaked its tissues like heavy rain, eroding delicate pathways. With levels receding, moss dries, stone reappears, and the hippocampus resumes, plotting latitude and longitude of daily life. You sense it when a gentle walk yields a memory untainted by threat. Meanwhile, the insula, hidden deep, updates the internal coastline heartbeats, gut waves, breaths. Interoception clarifies. letting you read bodily tides that foretell emotional weather. Old maps downplayed these signals, favoring external vigilance. The new edition gives them full legend, because knowing your inside landscape is knowing where to anchor when outside storms gather again. Mapping also means erasing. Synaptic paths that once carried persistent dread are scheduled for demolition. Microglia tagged them with molecular signposts that read vacant, and overnight cleaning crews dismantle unused scaffolding. This produces a curious lightness. You walk past the street where the accident happened and realize your pulse stays steady. The brain did not delete the street. It simply re-rated its significance, downgrading hazard to history to build confidence. The cerebellum practices tiny recalibrations. Once thought limited to movement, this densely folded organ now rehearses predictive coding. If I think this thought, how will my body respond? Each correct prediction stamps a seal of reliability on the new map. When predictions fail, adjustments follow until coordination of mind and muscle becomes smoother than before. You feel it in balanced posture, in handwriting no longer pressed into the page like warning letters. Social interaction is another surveying tool. Each conversation provides triangulation points, faces, tones, micro-expressions that refine emotional geography. Oxytocin flows, vasopressin negotiates borders, dopamine lights beacons along promising routes. Your map becomes multicultural, inclusive of perspectives beyond your own. Empathy, once narrowed by pain, widens like a valley after fog lifts. Yet, mapping is never neutral. Attention acts as spotlight selecting which terrain is worthy of ink. Rumination directs draftsmen back to the valley of shadow. Mindful curiosity leads them to unexplored meadows. Here, choice re-enters the process. By gently steering focus toward experiences of agency, you instruct neural surveyors to enlarge those provinces. Over weeks, cortical thickness increases. In regions of interest, giving literal weight to chosen values, technology echoes these truths. Brain-machine interface studies show neurons can quickly repurpose themselves to control robotic arms, proving that circuits care more about coherent output than historic allegiance. Within you, similar reallocations occur. Language networks may aid regulation of emotion. Motor imagery may soothe phantom hurt. Cross-modal translation turns deficits into detours rather than dead ends. Still, every new map needs a legend. The orbitofrontal cortex drafts it, assigning meaning and value. This path brings comfort that one costs too much stress. It updates, frequently printing small errata slips you experience as gut feelings. Trust grows when you learn to read them, decline invitations that drain, accept those that nourish. In doing so, you participate in cartography, a co-author rather than passive landmass. Sleep remains the printing press. During slow wave cycles, neural replay sharpens lines, thickens highways, erases redundant cul-de-sacs. Dreams test hypothetical voyages across the draft, simulating encounters and outcomes. Night after night, revisions spread like gradient washes until the map feels native, unforced. Morning clarity is the scent of fresh ink drying between your thoughts. Nutrition supplies, pigments, choline for acetylcholine loops, omega-3 south for membrane flexibility, antioxidants to keep colors from fading under metabolic sun. Movement provides scale bars, proprioceptive feedback aligning mental distances with physical reach. Silence offers margins where future annotations can fit. Even laughter curves rivers toward joy. making sure delight is not an isolated oasis but a flowing tributary. Inevitably, choices transform into habits, and the map begins to laminate. Myelin thickens on oft-traveled axons, protecting them like clear coat on cherished roots. This is both blessing and responsibility. Well-used paths become easy, less used ones grow faint. Periodic novelty trips keep the cartography honest, ensuring alternatives remain passable should terrain shift again. Note that evolving does not require forgetting. Regions encoding earlier self remain preserved, like historical quarters in modern cities. They coexist beside new towers of insight, giving heritage to progress. You can stroll those cobblestones, respect what happened, yet return to bright boulevards. Of the present, integration, not erasure, sustains continuity of self. As weeks turn into months, you witness subtle but telling markers. A song once unbearable becomes background hum. A stranger's kindness lands without suspicion. Ambition stirs, not from deficit but from possibility. These are milestones erected by neutral surveyors who report that the land is stable enough for construction of future hopes. Neuroscientists measure such rewrites in altered network centrality. Hubs shift from salience network, hypervigilance, to default mode introspection and executive coherence. You measure them in mornings when coffee smells like promise again. Both metrics agree. Orientation has changed. North has realigned, yet maps remain provisional. Earthquakes of experience may rumble later. Knowing this, the brain stores copies of flexible templates in transcribable catepigenetic marks that can loosen his stones, open chromatin, and summon growth genes back to drafting tables if new faults appear. Resilience, then, is archived adaptability. Tonight, as you settle further into the pillow, consider yourself a living atlas, pages turning with every breath. Names of regions evolve. Somber meadow becomes reflection pond. Panic ridge softens. Into Vigil Hill, Safety Harbor expands its shoreline. Lanterns of astrocytic calcium trace railway lines from prefrontal plans to limbic towns, promising trade in calm decisions. You may wonder where identity resides on such a mutable landscape. Perhaps it is not a city, but the pattern of travel among them, the narrative of routes you choose each day. Tomorrow, emotion will rise again, leaving echoes along valley walls, challenging the new map with floods of memory and tide of feeling. How will the cartography hold when water levels change? Elsewhere, researchers track navigation signals in entorhinal grids, Celestini compasses, firing in hexagonal patterns. After adversity, their firing fields can distort, mirroring subjective disorientation. During therapy or mindful wandering through real parks, those grids recalibrate, proving that walking through space recalibrates sense of place in mind. You notice it when a neighborhood walk clears static better than hours of thought. Community stories help too. Hearing survival tales activates mirror neurons, allowing your cortex to rehearse safe outcomes before you trust them firsthand. Culture functions as shared cartography, a public map where travelers compare notes, warn of hazards, highlight scenic overlooks. When you speak your truth aloud, you pin a small flag on this communal chart. Someone else may later steer by that. Beacon.technology offers new inks. Neurofeedback sessions let you watch your own rhythms climb and fall like tides on a screen, granting conscious steering over unconscious seas. Virtual reality exposes you to simulated cliffs, letting regions refine spatial judgment without real risk. These tools are supplementary compasses, not commanders. Yet they underscore the principle. Maps evolve fastest when feedback is immediate, gentle, and repeatable. Humor, surprisingly, is a surveying instrument. A sudden laugh releases endorphins that ripple through anterior cingulate cortex, loosening rigid error signals. In that looseness, cartographers redraw borders between self and circumstance, shrinking what felt permanent into something story-sized. A joke, then, is a tiny continental drift. As this chapter draws toward its quiet close, picture spark-lit roads glowing faintly on dark parchment. Observation satellites of consciousness orbit above, feeding positional updates into memory banks. The landscape still holds shadows, but paths between lanterns widen with every compassionate step you take. Soon, you will walk them carrying tender cargo gear, emotions listening for their echoes against new canyon walls. Those echoes will test the integrity of the map and reveal how deeply change has taken root. You rest in the hush where maps have been redrawn, and now the landscape of feeling steps forward. Emotions are not wisps that vanish when reason enters. They live in flesh, in molecules, in timed pulses of electricity that spread like tides across cortical shores. Trauma etched its message there, not as sentences, but as vibrations accelerated. Heartbeats, clenched muscles, bowels held tight. Even after danger passed, these physical poems continued to recite themselves, as though the body refused to forget the meter of alarm. Inside the limbic system, the amygdala and its allies record. Intensity first, meaning later. They store the pitch of a shout, the smell of burnt rubber. Such fragments turn into echoes that can ring long after the original note. A slammed door becomes thunder. Perfume becomes warning. A certain key in a song pries open breath. You may have noticed it, how a normal afternoon suddenly quivers without clear reason. That quiver is an echo, the body asking, is it happening again? Yet echoes can fade when given spacious valleys into which to travel. The fading begins with awareness, the gentle naming of sensation without rush to banish it. Neuroscientists call this labeling. Activity moves from limbic fire to prefrontal glow, translating raw feeling into reflective language. Studies show that merely saying, "I feel fear," lowers amygdala output and raises insular clarity. The word is a handrail across a trembling bridge. Breath supports the crossing. A slow inhale through nose, a longer exhale through mouth stimulates vagal pathways that release acetylcholine, taming heart rhythms. Each breath acts like a wave meeting an echo, cancelling its amplitude little by little. Over weeks, practiced breathing rewires baroreceptor feedback, so baseline calm deepens even. When echoes try to rattle the walls, movement helps too. When you walk at a steady cadence, proprioceptive signals ascend through spinal cord into cerebellum and basal ganglia, producing rhythmic predictability. Rhythms reassure the limbic system that the world is flowing, not jerking. This is why rocking soothes infants, and why running can feel like rinsing static from nerves. Rhythmic motion entrains internal metronomes, synchronizing neural oscillations that once spiked unpredictably after trauma. Tactile contact weaves another muffling cloth. A warm hand on sternum, the weight of a blanket, the pressure of a friendly hug itch activates mechanoreceptors that route through the thalamus into somatosensory cortex and onward to anterior cingulate. There, social touch merges with emotional valuation, releasing oxytocin that blunts cortisol. The echo softens further, as if footsteps now land on moss rather than stone. But softening is not erasure. The nervous system keeps archives in case lessons are needed again. Instead of deleting echoes, the brain teaches them to return as whispers, informative rather than overpowering. In exposure therapy, repeated safe meetings with once-triggering cues create new predictions in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Prediction erases surprise. Without surprise, the amygdala sees no reason to shout at night. Slow-wave sleep replays emotional memories within hippocampus to cortex loops, integrating context that daylight could not supply. Glymphatic currents wash metabolic residue, while REM weaves surreal narratives that blend fear with impossible courage. Perhaps you fly above the crash site. Perhaps you breathe underwater where once you choked. Dream researchers propose that such recombination recalibrates effect, lowering limbic volume on waking. Nutrition modulates echo volume as well. Omega-3 fatty acids stabilize cell membranes, enabling serotonin receptors to buffer mood. Magnesium quiets NMDA receptors, preventing glutamate storms. Fermented foods, seed gut, microbiota that chat via vagus nerve, tilting GABA production toward calm. Thus, meals become quiet letters telling the limbic halls that harvest, not famine, is here. Social storytelling amplifies fading when you share. Experience in safe company. Broca's area organizes chronology. Auditory cortex hears compassion in response. Mirror neurons fire, confirming resonance. Over time, the tale becomes narrative more than alarm. Historians of self rewrite the entry, from unbearable to survived. Echoes change frequency to match the cadence of that telling. Still, some days the echoes regain force weather fronts of hormones, anniversaries, or simple fatigue can thin the moss. This is natural. Plasticity, like climate, has seasons. On such days, you return to the toolkit, naming, breathing, moving, touching, eating, narrating. Repetition thickens pathways until they resemble canyon walls guiding rivers safely to sea. Scientists measure this progress in heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, and functional connectivity between amygdala and prefrontal regions. You measure it when a memory arrives and leaves without seizing your entire afternoon, when tears may visit but flow clear instead of burning. Soft doesn't mean numb. It means the nervous system can flex without snapping. Think of emotional echoes as wildlife in a recovering forest. Initially, they startle you, dear, darting across ruined road. In time, you learn their patterns, and they learn yours. Eventually, you coexist. You walk paths while they rustle in undergrowth, both aware, neither afraid. Coexistence marks resilience, a step beyond mere absence of fear. Curiosity accelerates this stage. MRI studies show that when people approach once avoidant memories with genuine interest, hippocampal engagement increases, framing experience in spatial-temporal context that supports coherent autobiography. The more coherent the story, the fewer stray echoes persist. Coherence does not deny pain. It shelves it where it can be reached without avalanche. Music can coax coherence. Songs with gentle crescendos stimulate nucleus accumbens, releasing dopamine that pairs with limbic notes, rebranding them with pleasure. Lullabies across cultures share similar intervals because those intervals mirror the inflected speech of parental soothing. Listening or humming such melodies provides acoustic scaffolding against which echoes dissipate. Some practitioners use interoceptive meditation, focusing on heartbeat loudness. Paradoxically, attending to the thump heightens insular accuracy, teaching the brain that sensation does not equal catastrophe. Over months, the anterior insula, seat of feelings, felt sense, displays reduced hyperactivation. Subjectively, you feel less hijacked, more anchored. Eventually, echoes may serve as guides. A tightening chest can become a compass pointing to boundaries, a signpost saying, here, care is required. Instead of triggering spiral, it starts dialogue. Prefrontal reasoning consults limbic signal. Is danger present, or is history speaking? This consultative government within you replaces the old coup d'etat of fear. As the brain refines these communications, white matter tracts, like the uncinate fasciculus linking amygdala to frontal lobe, thicken. Diffusion, tensor imaging, confirms strengthened lines. But you confirm through lived details, booking a trip, speaking your truth, standing in crowded rooms where once doors felt too narrow. Each act writes trust into connective tissue. Trust begets generosity. With echoes quieter, surplus attention flows outward. Mirror neurons greet smiles. The superior temporal sulcus tracks gaze, and oxytocin encourages affiliative risk. Community re-enters the body. Relationships become not arenas to manage threat, but gardens to explore nuance. Yet the work never fully ends. Life scores new impressions daily. Some will reverberate unexpectedly. Resilience is maintenance, not final state. Think of tuning a piano. Strings stretch, humidity shifts, songs deaden. Periodic tuning returns harmony. So you keep your rituals. Breath, movement, story, rest. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, note any lingering tremor in ribcage. Instead of pushing it away, cradle it with attention. Offer a slow exhale, perhaps a hand above heart. Imagine the tremor as footsteps under rain, each drop smoothing sharp edges. Listen until rhythm matches breath. Artistic expression is another. Soft hammer that chips calcified echoes into fertile dust. When you sketch a memory, the parietal cortex converts emotional geometry into line and shade. When you dance, promoter areas braid kinesthetic sentence from unspeakable syllables. Both actions shift limbic charge into sensory motor channels, dispersing voltage like lightning rods flaunting sky. Research with trauma patients shows clay modeling and watercolor sessions reduce startle, reflex amplitude by measurable margins. Even the passage of chronological time participates. Telomeres at chromosome ends, once shortened by stress, can lengthen when calm returns. Enzymes, like telomeres, rise after meditation retreats, hinting that echoes fading reaches genetic punctuation. Biological calendars rewrite margins, granting seasons for growth. Light has its say as well. Morning photons entering retina cue suprachiasmatic nuclei, arranging hormonal choir so cortisol peaks gently instead of spiking. Evening amber lamps dim melanopsin response, letting melatonin compose the lullaby that deep sleep requires. Every sunrise and sunset, if witnessed with intention, becomes a metronome guiding endocrine symphony toward steadiness. Professional support accelerates tuning. A therapist's regulated voice entrains your vagal rhythm. Eye movement, desensitization, taxes, working memory while recalling pain, lessening vividness. Biofeedback displays heart rate variability as a dancing line. You learn to smooth. These technologies and relationships remind the limbic system that shepherds stand watch. Finally, gratitude practice sprinkles dopamine and serotonin into anterior cingulate, lighting pathways of savor. Gratitude is not denial, it is wider framing. Echoes shrink when placed beside vistas of wonder dawn mist, bird call, the quiet dignity of your own perseverance. What began as thunder becomes part of a symphony with room for violins, for silence, for applause, and space for gentle breath. Night folds itself around you like a deep velvet curtain, and within that darkness a small seahorse-shaped structure begins its quiet craft. Nestled deep in the temporal lobe, the hippocampus is neither loud nor large. Yet it holds the loom on which the fabric of your remembered life is woven. In the hush that follows the day's commotion, it lifts its needle of electrical pulses and begins to sew. Some stitches repair fresh tears. Trauma left rips moments too sharp to hold, scenes that cracked like frozen glass. Rather than forcing shards together, the hippocampus gathers nearby threads of context. A scent that was present, a color on the wall, the angle of late sunlight. It knots these softer fibers around the raw edge, turning open wound into bordered aperture. Later, when you revisit that time, the border helps you look without being cut. Scientists call this contextual binding. You feel it as the difference between flinching at every siren and recognizing that tonight's siren is far away and brief. Other stitches create entirely new cloth. Deep in the dentate gyrus, newborn neurons sprout each dawn like pale seedlings after rain. They are excitable, eager to belong, and they wander until they find a gap in the tapestry that matches their sensitivity. When they settle, they mark the beginning of a fresh motif, perhaps the taste of chamomile tea shared with a friend, or the color of the mug that warmed your hands. Adult neurogenesis once seemed impossible. Now magnetic resonance shows its fingerprint as subtle increases in hippocampal volume. Following months of mindful practice or gentle exercise, the hippocampus does not work alone. Across the corpus callosum, it sends threads to prefrontal managers who decide which memories need front row storage and which can rest in the balcony. It whispers to the amygdala, asking how bright the emotional die should be. If alarm was high, the die runs deep crimson. If calm prevailed, it stays pastel. Over time, the hippocampus revisits the bolt, washing excess pigment so colors soften. This is why early recollections of trauma scorch, yet years later, the same scene can be held with less heat. Sleep is its favored workshop. During slow wave phases, neurons fire in rhythmic conflagrations called sharp wave ripples. These ripples replay the daytime's travels at accelerated speed, as though the brain were fast-forwarding a film to find key frames. Each replay passes the pattern to neocortical archives, where it is cross-indexed with older reels faces, places, languages. Simultaneously, cerebrospinal fluid surges in synchronized waves, washing metabolic ash from glial hearths. In the morning, you may remember a detail you thought lost, or sense ease where tension lived. These are signs the night shift finished another row. REM sleep is stranger still. Here the hippocampus loosens its grip, letting associative winds lift memory fragments into surreal constellations. A playground merges with a cathedral. A childhood friend borrows your adult voice. Researchers believe this dream kaleidoscope promotes creative recombination, stretching the textile so patterns can overlap and share borders. What wakes is a mind less stuck, more willing to consider new routes around old obstacles. Daylight offers different tools. When you take a walk, each footfall sends vestibular and proprioceptive pulses upward. Grid cells in the entorhinal cortex fire in a hexagonal dance, providing the hippocampus with spatial graph paper. Every corner turned, every landmark noted gives the loom more reference points. That is why labyrinth gardens and woodland paths feel medicinal. They feed navigation circuits whose health supports narrative coherence. Similarly, smells rosemary, fresh bread, rain on stone travel, swift olfactory highways, reaching the hippocampus in 2 synapses. Olfaction bypasses the thalamic checkpoint, offering vivid dye for emotional threads. Storytelling activates the loom from another angle. When you speak memories aloud, Broca's region shapes sentences, but the hippocampus supplies chronology. As listeners nod, mirror neurons echo, and your internal map aligns with external empathy. The fabric tightens, loose ends anchor. Functional imaging shows increased coupling between hippocampus and anterior cingulate during such disclosure, correlating with feelings of relief. Nutrition and movement provide raw materials. Glucose fuels, but omega-3 fatty acids make membranes supple, allowing synaptic needles to pierce with ease. Aerobic exercise elevates brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a molecular spool that winds new dendrites. Even intermittent fasting seems to sharpen autophagic scissors, cutting away frayed protein strands so fresh twine can pass unobstructed. Yet some holes persist. Certain moments shattered so completely that no thread, however fine, can reassemble them. The hippocampus acknowledges these blank spaces, surrounding them with gentle lattice rather than forcing ill-fitting patches. You experience this as acceptance, a recognition that not all memories must return for the story to feel whole. Opacity becomes part of the pattern, a quiet aesthetic of absence as seasons pass. The fabric stretches outward, inviting future experiences to latch on to prepared edges. You meet new friends, learn a language, plant a garden, and each venture sows additional panels. Comparative studies note that multilingual elders boast denser hippocampal networks, their quilts layered with parallel scripts. Similarly, musicians show enlarged posterior hippocampi, perhaps because melodies demand intricate spatial ordering of notes across time. Of course, stress can still tug threads loose. A sudden shock floods cortisol, making hippocampal neurons retract like scorched vines. But previous weaving has reinforced structural beams. Retraction is temporary, regrowth faster. Resilience is thus visible at the microscopic level, a measure of how swiftly dendrites re-extend after withdrawal. You help this regrowth through rituals of grounding. Slow sips of water, deliberate stretches, mindful gazes at horizon all tell the hypothalamus to quiet the adrenal chorus. With cortisol-tamed hippocampal synthesis of long-term potentiation proteins resumes. LTP is the knot that secures adjacent stitches, turning temporary traces into lasting embroidery. Without it, experiences blow away like loose petals. With it, they root and bloom. Another ally is novelty. When you step off familiar sidewalks into an art museum or start a conversation in an unfamiliar language, dopamine trickles from the ventral tegmental area. This neuromodulator tags hippocampal spines, marking them for stabilization. Exploration, therefore, is fertilizer for the loom. But novelty needs safety's backdrop. Too much unpredictability tears fabric faster than it can be sewn. Balance remains the weaver's creed. Technology now glimpses these stitches. High-resolution diffusion imaging tracks water along axons, revealing new bundles after cognitive therapy. Electrophysiology captures place self fields, remapping during virtual reality tasks. Such findings echo what you feel, the map inside. Your mind updates not as metaphor, but as measurable change. Within the hippocampus, time cells add another layer. They fire in sequence, marking the order of experiences. Their rhythm is subtle, yet essential. Without it, stories lose narrative. Spine. Meditation appears to elongate their firing windows, granting you a slower sense of passing moments, abundance of now in which healing can proceed. Culturally, rituals of remembrance, lighting candles, visiting graves, composing letters to past selves, invite the hippocampus to integrate grief without drowning. Symbolic acts leverage the brain's love of landmarking. A candle flame equals a temporal beacon. A headstone equals a spatial one. Anchors set, currents calm. All the while, glial partners hover, delivering lactate snacks, cleaning detritus, and whispering cytokine lullabies that modulate plastic thresholds. They are the silent assistants of the master tailor. As tonight deepens, you may feel flickers behind closed eyelids, phosphine patterns of calcium waves echoing the days we've trusted them. Your mind's atelier is open, lights low, artisans gentle. In this atelier, even loss finds contour, even chaos finds form. Tomorrow, as dawn edges curtains, you might recall a dream fragment, a patchwork road stitched from cobblestones of many cities. That imaginary road is evidence de loom practicing, routes your waking self may soon walk. Every rehearsal lowers construction costs in daylight. When you open your journal and write a single sentence about how you feel, you drive the shuttle again. Language on one beam, emotion on another. Over weeks, such sentences twine into coherency strong enough to bear the weight of new aspirations. The hippocampus prepares these aspirations for handoff. Its stitches hold memory, but decision lives elsewhere. The next shift belongs to the prefrontal cortex, that frontal lantern which evaluates options, inhibits impulses, plans leaps. Hippocampal fabric will drape over prefrontal frames, offering context so choices are rooted rather than reckless. Listen. The needle pauses. A breath of silence measures tension. Threads glisten, taut but forgiving. Work continues, but anew. Foreman is arriving, lantern in hand, ready to examine the freshly woven sheet and decide where the mind may step next. You lie beneath the barely breathing night, feeling the loom of memory settle after the hippocampal shift change. Now, softly, another glow awakens at the very front of your brain. It is not the brutal white flash of noon. It is candlelight, coaxed rather than struck, each flicker a calculated risk. This is the prefrontal cortex stirring from convalescence, testing the edges of its own authority after a long sabbatical. Trauma dimmed this region, drawing blinds so limbic alarms could seize the stage. But the alarms have quieted. In the hush, leadership must return. The prefrontal cortex is an architect of what if. It balances ledgers of probability, plots, timelines, applies brakes to impulse. When disaster struck, power routed away from these deliberative offices, feeding emergency generators in deeper vaults. Now, as metabolic winds settle, power flows back through corridors lined with pyramidal neurons. Janitors of astrocyte and oligodendrocyte have already dusted and rewired. Still, the lights rise slowly to avoid startling the staff. First, dorsolateral chambers wake. They calculate sequences, hold items in working memory, juggle rules like lanterns. You notice this revival as the quiet thrill of planning tomorrow's breakfast-steel cut oats with cinnamon, perhaps instead of the default toast. Such small intention is milestone. It proves mental time travel functions again. Studies show that after mindfulness training, dorsolateral activation increases even during mundane choice, marking re-established executive grip. Offices follow, responsible for valuing outcomes through the currency of feeling. They consult the amygdala for risk rates, the insula for bodily hunches, the hippocampus for precedent. Under trauma's reign, their valuations skewed towards survival at any cost. Now they broaden portfolios: health, curiosity, connection. You experience this as subtle preference. Shifts a walk, replaces scrolling, conversation outweighs withdrawal. Functional imaging reveals stronger connectivity between ventromedial hub and reward circuits. When hope outweighs dread, anterior cingulate, the mediator, lights up next. It monitors errors, detects conflict, decides whether to persist or pivot. Burned by adrenaline, it once signaled constant red, exhausting attention. With chemistry calmer, red becomes amber, then green. You feel the difference when a dropped glass registers as inconvenience, not catastrophe. Heart rate barely budges. Shoulders stay loose. Such resilience is not denial. It is discriminant precision reinstated. Frontal pole, uniquely human, rises. Last strategist of abstractions, dreamer of multi-year arcs. Its neurons reach far into parietal and temporal territories, weaving narratives of identity. After trauma, this pole folded maps and stored them away. Without long roads, the mind camped short distance from the hurt. Tonight, it unrolls parchment. Again, possible journeys ink themselves, faintly learning an instrument, fostering relationships, returning to study. Hope is not wishful. It is architectural drafting. The physiology behind this reawakening is as deliberate as the growth that preceded it. Cortisol baselines drop, lifting the molecular blockade that once shrank dendritic arbors. BDNF rises, fertilizing. Synaptic soil, microglia, shift phenotype from inflammatory M1 to reparative M2, seeding antioxidant factors that protect fragile plans. Myelin sheaths, thickened by earlier practice, speed signal from thought to limbic.com, enabling reflection. Before reaction, decision-making, however, returns in gradations, like color seeping into dawn sky. At first you manage only low-risk choices: which mug, which song, which shirt. These micro-decisions fine-tune circuits via spike timing-dependent plasticity. Each correct prediction supplies dopamine to prefrontal terminals, encouraging further venture. Neuroscientists call this reinforcement prediction error. You call it satisfaction. Gradually, you attempt larger moves. You schedule therapy, decline an invitation that once triggered guilt, maybe volunteer. Prefrontal beta and gamma oscillations synchronize with hippocampal theta, forging cross-frequency coupling, electrical handshake between memory and foresight. You feel coherence as a steadier voice in inner counsel, able to overrule limbic whispers without aggression, yet caution remains. The reawakening prefrontal system must negotiate with basal ganglia habits forged during darkness avoidance loops, doom scrolls, hypervigilant routines. When old patterns surface, you notice the tug, an urge to cancel plans, a flare of irritation at harmless noise. Instead of condemning yourself, you treat the urge as weather data. Orbitofrontal cortex compares current context to stored contingencies, updates expectation, and gently extinguishes reflex that no longer aligns with reality. Language plays midwife. When you journal intentions, Broca's area collaborates with dorsolateral cortex, translating fuzzy aims into grammatical blueprints. Writing, I will stroll by the river at dusk wires, promoter circuits, making follow-through more probable. Commitments stated aloud recruit social accountability. Mirror neurons in listeners reflect conviction back, amplifying resolve. Sleep remains vital. During REM, pontogeniculo-occipital waves bathe prefrontal areas in acetylcholine, rehearsing hypothetical futures, dream scenarios, test strategies in low-stakes theater, pruning inefficiencies. People practicing lucid dreaming demonstrate thicker anterior prefrontal cortex, suggesting bidirectional cultivation. Awareness within dreams trains waking control and vice versa. Nutrition similarly buttresses. Tyrosine-rich seeds feed dopamine. Synthesis. Leafy greens supply folate, crucial for methylation of genes governing executive function. Even the act of cooking engages prefrontal planning timers, sequencing. Multitasking that strengthens the very circuits nourishment supports. Movement offers parallel gains. Complex activities dance, martial arts demand inhibition, timing, spatial reasoning. MRI shows increased gray matter in supplementary motor area and prefrontal cortex among long-term practitioners. You sense this as bodily confidence translating into mental agility. A graceful pivot on hardwood becomes easier pivot in dialogue. Still, relapse is natural. A scent, an anniversary, an unexpected loud bang can siphon resources back to limbic bunkers. The prefrontal lights flicker. When that happens, breath offers bridge. Slow inhale, longer exhale, counting for beats in 8 out. This rhythm drives vagal tone, restoring heart-brain synchrony. Within 90 seconds, adrenaline metabolizes. Prefrontal illumination steadies. Therapy techniques, such as cognitive reappraisal, explicitly exercise these pathways. By reframing a negative event, you activate dorsolateral reasoning and dampen amygdala spike. Over time, white matter in the uncinate fasciculus thickens, easing communication. Mindfulness meditation increases gyrification along the prefrontal insular border, reflecting cortical efficiency. Social context acts as either fertilizer or frost. Supportive relationships mirror and validate new patterns, while toxic ones reignite defensive reflex. Here, prefrontal executive must make policy decisions, boundaries, distance, dialogue. Each assertive step strengthens ventrolateral inhibitory circuits, proving to yourself that safety can be self-made, not merely bestowed. Technology can assist. Neurofeedback displays your frontal midline theta in real time. Learning to modulate it teaches self-regulation. Apps prompt micro-decisions. Drink water, stretch, breathe, embedding tiny rehearsals that accumulate into structural resilience. Even selecting what media to consume is prefrontal voting. Uplifting content seeds positive predictions. Violent loops cultivate suspicion. Over months, evidence of change accumulates. Heart rate variability improves, signifying balanced autonomic sway. Ear temperature asymmetry normalizes, hinting at hemispheric equilibrium. Subjectively, mornings come without dread. Evenings end without rumination. Plans extend weeks ahead. Budgets take shape. Mistakes prompt learning rather than shame. Importantly, logic returns, integrated with compassion. Prefrontal circuits mature. Not into cold calculus, but wise counsel balancing limbic color. Oxytocin receptor density in medial prefrontal cortex supports empathic reasoning. You can disagree without dehumanizing, critique self without cruelty. This harmony defines post-trauma growth. One evening, You notice you are bored, not numb bored. Boredom signals that capacity now exceeds current demand, an invitation to challenge. The prefrontal lobe loves challenge. It thrives on puzzles. Novel routes, creative synthesis. You pick up a forgotten instrument, try a new recipe, plan travel. Each endeavor expands dendritic foliations, like spring branches. Curiosity thus replaces hypervigilance. Science shows novelty-seeking elevates dopaminergic firing. The same chemical once tied to risk now funds exploration. Where fear once drilled trenches, curiosity builds bridges, connecting islands of experience into archipelagos of meaning. This renaissance is fragile but self-reinforcing. Every successful decision increases self-efficacy. Each failure interpreted kindly teaches adaptability. Myelin lays thicker along efficiency corridors, reducing metabolic cost, leaving surplus energy for creativity. Creativity, in turn, lights the default mode network, which meets prefrontal control in a dance of divergent and convergent thinking. Trauma once decoupled these networks. Healing weaves them back, producing insights that feel like dawn in slow motion. Yet decisions are never made in vacuum. The body whispers constant updates: gut microbiome, hormonal tides, muscular readiness. Insular cortex passes these two prefrontal interpreters. A balanced executive listens. When fatigue speaks, it schedules rest. When enthusiasm swells, it green lights action. This respectful dialogue prevents depletion, sustaining growth trajectory. Even ethics bloom here. With fear-reduced energy turns outward to justice, to empathy for wider circles. The prefrontal cortex simulates others' viewpoints, calculates fairness, imagines consequences generations away. Altruistic behavior correlates with robust activity in this region. Post-trauma survivors often report heightened purpose. Neurology suggests this is architecture, not accident. You may sense subtle warmth behind forehead bones, metaphor perhaps. Yet EEG electrodes detect increased alpha in left prefrontal corner during gratitude reflection. That warmth radiates through narrative. You tell stories colored by agency, not solely by survival. As nights cycle, hippocampal fabric and prefrontal lantern intertwine. Memory offers cloth, prefrontal shapes, garment, limbic system chooses hues. Together they craft identity, adaptive yet coherent. Psychologists term this autobiographical reasoning. You experience it as internal alignment, thoughts, feelings, actions marching close enough to share drumbeat. Inevitably, challenges come, deadlines, conflicts, news of world pain. But systems now coordinate. Prefrontal cortex appraises, consults. Hippocampal archives, negotiates with limbic watchdogs, then issues measured command. Body acts, outcome feeds back, map updates. Homeostasis becomes dynamic equilibrium. Art steps in as gentle trainer. Sketching lets lines wander while judgment waits, teaching patience. Gardening measures, seasons, and deliberate care. Creative play exercises the frontal lobes to tolerate ambiguity, teaching your mind to inhabit uncertainty with curiosity instead of fear. Music, too, coordinates timing, memory, and emotional nuance. Eventually, you recognize that the same circuitry allowing complex scheduling can also steer dreams. Lucid practitioners leverage prefrontal insight to alter dream plots, rehearse problem solving. This foreshadows the next chapter, where sleep's theater continues, cleaning and integrating. Every deliberate stroke or seed sown trains foresight to bloom without restless haste. For tonight, let candlelight remain soft, feel pulse in temples, whispering proof that executive corridors hum quietly, nothing overheating. Place gentle intent on tomorrow, a decision, small but kind. Perhaps it is watering a plant, or smiling at a stranger, or writing one line of poetry. Trust that each deliberate act lays another parquet tile in the hall of recovered self-governance. Night descends, and with it a hush that feels almost liquid, soaking through bone and pillow alike. In this settling darkness, your brain turns. Its keys opens back corridors and invites janitors who work only under moonlight. They look like sparks in laboratory recordings, brief voltages darting through neural streets. Set what they carry are brooms, buckets, and quiet resolve. Their shift is called rapid eye movement sleep, REM for short, though the motion of eyes is only the marquee. The true labor occurs in dim basements of memory and metabolism where no daylight ever reaches. During waking hours, every thought, sensation, and reflex leaves molecular crumbs behind. Adenosine drifts between synapses, potassium ions puddle outside. Membranes, proteins misfold or break. Imagine a bustling marketplace at dusk, fruit rinds on cobblestones, lamp oil spilled near stalls, whispered stories lingering in dust. If morning opened on that mess, the town would stall, unable to trade. So too would the brain stumble under yesterday's debris. REM is sanitation shift and recycling plant combined. Your pulse slows, muscles surrender, but inside the skull, cerebrospinal fluid surges like tidewater through narrow streets. This glymphatic flow, first mapped by 2-photon microscopy in sleeping mice, washes metabolites, beta amyloid, tau fragments, reactive oxygen species toward drainage canals beside neck veins. The floodgates open widest during REM because neural networks synchronize in low voltage, high frequency patterns resembling wakefulness. That activity pumps paravascular channels like heartbeats for fluid. Yet cleaning chemicals alone cannot dislodge memories stuck in emotional resin. Trauma leaves splinters, sensory shards, unspoken words, unfinished fight or flight impulses. These fragments cling to limbic walls. Dreams arrive as solvent. Their images seem random, an elevator sinking into ocean, a childhood room ablaze, with odd colors, but each tableau is molecular theater, a method to stir static recollections and let lymph carry smaller pieces away. Researchers at Harvard once described dreaming as overnight therapy. Functional MRI shows amygdala firing during REM, but prefrontal oversight remains dim, keeping narrative loose enough for reconfiguration. Stress neurochemicals like noradrenaline drop to their lowest ebb, creating a chemical canvas safe for repainting fear without reliving it fully. It is rehearsal in soft lighting, an exposure session run by unconscious directors. Nightmares, then, are not malfunctions. They are braver cleaners tackling stubborn stains. A soldier re-experiences shell bursts, so hippocampus and amygdala can renegotiate threat tags under chemical conditions that favor detachment. Over successive nights, explosions lose volume, colors mute, distance appears. Eventually, the dream rewrites into symbolic echoer, backfiring car, a distant flash walkable without panic. Clinical trials with image rehearsal therapy support. This arc, adjusting nightmare scripts, shortens terror, yet leaves learning intact. Meanwhile, memory librarians catalog what stays. Sharp wave ripples from hippocampus replay waking sequences, but REM adds distortion, cutting, blending, overlaying. Procedural skills, such as a piano progression practiced at dusk, replay with finger errors exaggerated, then corrected, solidifying motor circuits. Studies find REM density spikes after intense learning, deprive volunteers of that stage, and skill growth stalls. Even language gains show similar dependence. Vocabulary whispered at bedtime resurfaces. Polished after dream rehearsal, chemical choreography guides the shift. Acetylcholine surges, promoting plasticity. Serotonin and histamine fade, releasing sensory gating. Pontogeniculo-occipital waves start in brainstem, splash through thalamus, and paint occipital cortex with phosphine static. You perceive flashes behind eyelids. Each wave is both spotlight for cleaning crews and rough draft for dream imagery. When an early wave encounters an unresolved emotional node, it lingers, looping circuitry until the knot loosens a bit, much like water worrying stone. Body paralysis, mediated by ventromedial medulla inhibiting spinal motor neurons, prevents enactment. Of these invisible stories, only eyes flicker, tracing scene changes, heart rate twitches in sync with plot turns. Breathing accelerates during chase sequences, slows in tranquil vistas. Autonomic fluctuation itself aids waste removal, changes in thoracic pressure spur lymphatic return. Squeezing venous lakes at skull base. Nutrition influences this theater. Tryptophan-rich foods raise melatonin, guiding sleep onset, but choline from eggs fuels acetylcholine bursts that color REM, lack either nutrient, and dreams dim, cleaning slows. Likewise, exercise earlier in day boosts slow wave sleep, which precedes REM, ensuring debris is first loosened by deep wave soak before rapid eye scrub. Alcohol, conversely, disrupts REM cycles, akin to switching off pumps mid-wash, leaving grime to dry in corners. Morning fog after heavy drink is evidence of unfinished chores. The immune system joins as midnight partner. Microglia extend processes. During REM, pruning excess synapses unveiled by earlier plastic growth. Cytokines like interleukin-10 peak, damping inflammation. In PTSD patients, elevated inflammatory markers correlate with reduced REM efficiency, hinting that failure to cleanse feeds constant arousal. Therapies that lower inflammation omega-3 intake, mindfulness, gentle yoga form improve dream quality. Cultural practices intuit this biology. Ancient Greeks kept dream incubation temples. Indigenous nations held night circle storytelling to honor message dreams. Modern sleep labs echo these spaces with electrodes and spectral graphs instead of incense. Yet the purpose matches. Witness the night, respect its medicine. You contribute by preparing a gentle prelude. Dimming lights signal suprachiasmatic nucleus to release melatonin. Cool air narrows peripheral vessels, channeling warm blood inward to neural machinery. A brief gratitude reflection tilts ventromedial valuations toward safety, predicting calmer content. As REM cycles repeat about 90 minutes apart, the brain's janitorial crew tackles mess and passes. Early dreams clear surface litter. Later cycles dive deeper, dredging submerged themes. Shortly before dawn, last REM often runs longest, finishing polishing floors just as cortisol rises to power daytime activity. You wake with either lingering dream dust or surprising clarity, depending on job completion. If clarity comes, you may notice spaciousness around memories that once crowded the mind. Conversations flow without hidden echoes. Concentration stretches. Farther, body feels lighter. This is clean circuitry, glymphatic channels flushed, synaptic weights balanced. Wearable devices that track heart rate variability often show elevated morning scores after plentiful REM. Biophysical proof of successful night work, when clarity doesn't come when you wake amid fragments you need not judge. Sometimes debris requires multiple shifts. Recording snippets in a journal helps externalize residue, giving hippocampus daylight assistance. Practiced over months, such writing correlates with more coherent narrative dreams and shorter nightmare. ARC's researchers now explore targeted memory reactivation, playing soft cues linked to learning while sleepers enter REM. Early results suggest we can gently steer housekeeping crews, highlighting spots needing extra attention without waking. Future therapies may cue calm heartbeats to veterans, lavender scent to trauma survivors, guiding dreams toward reparative corridors. Yet even now, without devices, your body knows the route. Provided darkness, silence, and willingness to wander, it descends staircases of consciousness, opens floodgates, and lets night currents rinse. Think of REM as river guided by moon's tug. Though unseen, its motion sculpts canyons, carries silt, carves new deltas for tomorrow's thoughts to seed. At times you may surface inside the river loose wide, floating through dream corridors. If calm, you might nudge the plot, invite light into a shadowed room, or ask nightmare figures what they need. Studies show lucid interventions can decrease terror frequency, suggesting agency itself is solvent. But even passive drifting helps. Observation steadies heart rhythms, letting chores continue uninterrupted. Science still puzzles over ultimate purpose of dreams, yet consensus grows that they are not noise. They are integration of memory with emotion, of learning with value, of self with wider story. When brain injuries damage REM circuitry, patients struggle with mood regulation and memory consolidation, reinforcing the stage's necessity. As dawn's edge glows, pontur, geniculus, occipital waves, phagy muscle inhibition lifts, and genitors clock out. Cerebrospinal tides recede, leaving neural streets gleaming. Your eyelids flutter, and for a breath the dream overlay and waking world align. Sometimes, insights slip through, gifting creativity. Many breakthroughs, Kekul's benzene ring, Paul McCartney's Yesterday emerged from this handoff. Soon alarms chirp, feet meet floor, and daytime circuits rev. Metabolite loads accumulate again, stories collect fresh edits, small stressors drop crumbs. Yet knowing a nightly crew returns brings trust. Healing is rhythmic, not linear. Tomorrow night the river will flow again, the fruits of nocturnal cleaning extend beyond neurons. Cardiac tissue rests under gentler pulses. Gut microbes pace chemistry to quiet brainstem cues, curbing inflammatory sparks that would fog thought. Skin cells mend faster while core temperature dips, all choreographed by REM's backstage lights. Thus dreams coordinate a whole body service call. Tightening bolts, few diagnostics track. After several nights of vivid dreaming, you may stand taller, breathe easier, crave crisper foods. Those urges are somatic acknowledgments that clearance succeeded. Neglect sleep, and it feels like moving through smoky rooms. Each decision meets invisible drag. Modern life tries to steal this gift with screens and alerts, yet you hold leverage. Dim lamps, silence notifications, play gentle music, choose pages over pixels. Small gestures open the sluice gate right on. Schedule. Remember too, that not every fragment surrendered to the river comes from mind alone. The body stores stories in fascia, diaphragm, jaw. Upcoming cycles of deep rest and REM coax muscles to slacken with twitches unseen beneath blankets. Those micro-releases prime waking tissue to stretch easily during tomorrow's walk, closing the loop between night repair and daylight grace. So REM offers a covenant, honor its rhythm, and it will lighten tomorrow's step. The promise echoes, past dawn to how skin thrills at breeze, how ears catch laughter, how hands settle over heart without flinch. Cleaning makes space. Space invites listening, and listening will matter as daylight signals rise from body toward the attentive. Mind? Its whisper grows clearer every cycle, asking you simply, listen. You wake beneath pale morning light, yet healing does not start in the skull. It begins lower behind sternum, beneath ribs, along the stretch of skin that meets cool air. Long before words, your body knows the weather inside you. Heartbeats measure safety. Gut microbes vote on mood. Facial muscles flash Morse code of hope or warning. These messages travel to the brain like birds returning to roost, and tonight we linger. With their flight, take their heart. Each contraction sends pressure waves along baroreceptors lodged in aortic arch and carotid sinuses. When rhythm is smooth slight flex, soft release signals ascend the vagus nerve, reaching nucleus tractus solitarius in brainstem. There, neurons translate pulse into tone, forwarding the news to amygdala, hypothalamus, insula, a calm beat. Whispers, all is well, plan, explore. A racing beat warns, guard, prepare. After trauma, heart often thunders at minor stresses, teaching the brain a world of false alarms. Yet, with every paced breath, vagal influence strengthens, slowing beats. Rewriting headlines. That is neuroception, the body's primal security appraisal. Shift attention lower, to gut. Within its coiling corridors live trillions of bacteria, artisans of neurotransmitters. They ferment fiber into short-chain fatty acids that enter bloodstream, cross blood-brain barrier, and modulate microglia reactivity. Some craft GABA, easing neural excitability. Others generate serotonin precursors. When trauma tightened appetite or bent diet toward sugar, microbial balance tottered. Feeding anxiety loops. Restorative meals, yogurt, kimchi, leafy green splant, calmer storytellers. Through the vagus enteric messages surface in insula as either dread or quiet satiation. The brain, receiving steady reports of internal abundance, loosens its grip. On fear, skin speaks tooth through tactile fibers that respond to gentle, slow stroking. Such touch travels a distinct path via dorsal horn, ascending spinothalamic tract to posterior insula, birthing feelings of safe presence. Research shows that even self-soothing, palm over heart, hands wrapping shoulders activates these fibers, lowering cortisol. When trusted others hug you, oxytocin blooms, binding to receptors in amygdala and nucleus accumbens, shading memories with belonging. Slowly, defensive postures unwind, shoulders drop, jaw unhooks, back uncurls. Posture itself is telegram. Erect spine tells brain there's room to survey horizon, not merely watch the ground. Our lungs contribute. Each inhale gently stretches baroreceptors in airway tissues. Exhale compresses them. Extended exhalations for counts of 6 or 8. Increase vagal momentum, lengthening intervals between heartbeats, a metric called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. High variability signals, adaptive flexibility. Studies show trauma survivors reclaim variability through practices like coherent breathing, chanting, humming. Vibration of vocal cords during hum stimulates auricular branch of vagus at ear canal. A side door to calm. Muscles carry stories. 2. Fascia, the webbing around fibers, thickens under chronic tension. Myofibroblasts embed memories of bracing us, if armor lingers, even when battlefield empties. Slow stretching, yoga, tai chi, send proprioceptive data up dorsal columns to cerebellum and parietal cortex, updating the body map. As length returns to hamstrings and neck, parietal neurons redraw boundaries, signaling prefrontal areas that territory is no longer on emergency lockdown. Think of these ascending currents as tributaries, feeding the great river of interoception. The insula curved deep within lateral sulcus receives them, creates a multisensory tapestry of how you are. In trauma, insular representation can blur or over-amplify, leaving you numb or hypersensitive. Mindful body scans recalibrate. Its gain, teaching discrimination. This is hunger, not danger. This is fatigue, not failure. The process is by as brain learns to interpret bodily cues accurately, it sends kinder descending commands through hypothalamus and autonomic nuclei, shaping hormone release, gut motility, immune tone. A virtuous loop emerges. Body signals calm, brain echoes calm. Body calms further. Consider one ordinary sip of warm tea. Heat touches lip, thermoceptors. Sweetness meets taste buds. Aroma wafts to olfactory bulb. Signals converge in orbitofrontal cortex, which registers comfort and forwards value back to hypothalamus. The latter releases tiny pulses of vasopressin. That steady blood pressure, and the cycle of reassurance completes. Such small rituals, repeated, reprogram basal prediction networks so-called allostasis toward steadier baselines. The immune system, once primed for battle, also receives the memo. Fewer cytokine sirens blare. Microglia retreat from attack mode. Inflammatory load drops, freeing tryptophan from kynurenine pathway back to serotonin synthesis. Mood lifts, not by willpower, but by molecular realignment, guided from stomach lining to skull. During this chapter of healing, misinterpretations still happen. A flutter of indigestion may masquerade as anxiety. A skipped heartbeat might trigger memories of panic. Here, you practice gentle inquiry. Is this a threat or a sensation? Questioning recruits prefrontal cortex to step between signal and story, teaching discernment. Over months, false alarms lose leverage. Somatic therapies leverage these pathways. Intentionally, EMDR's bilateral tapping engages sensory motor circuits. Somatic experiencing invites micro-movements to discharge trapped motor plans. Massage, acupuncture, cold water immersions, all modulate afferent vagal traffic, shaping top-down appraisal. Each method sends evidence that body can flex and recover, encouraging brain to trust the vessel it commands. Community amplifies signals. Group singing entrains breathing, synchronizes heart rate variability among participants. Shared laughter contracts abdominals in harmony, floods systems with endorphins. Eye contact sets off a cascade from retinal ganglion cells through superior colliculus to limbic loop that validates existence mutually. Social mammals heal in herds. Humans are no exception. Nature adds another dialect. Walking barefoot on grass delivers low-frequency vibrations through Pacinian corpuscles. Sunlight on skin cues vitamin D pathways influencing dopamine levels. Even viewing fractal patterns, branches, waves, clouds reduces stress markers, possibly because visual cortex evolved to process such statistics efficiently, lowering metabolic cost. All these dialogues converge in thalamus, the relay hub, which parcels information to cortical spokes. Balanced input produces coherent cortical rhythms: alpha in occipital, theta in hippocampus, beta in frontal midline. Much like instruments tuning to shared reference, when rhythms align, a felt sense of being in one piece arises, a contrast to trauma's fragmentation. From this embodied integrity, language may stir. Broca's area, once silenced by overwhelming emotion, perks up when insular reports manageable states. Words coil on tongue, ready to name experience. Naming, you will discover next, is not mere labeling but the brain's bridge from sensation to narrative, sealing healing into communal, shareable form. You sit beside a window washed with late afternoon light, hands warmed by the cup you cradle, and feel a tremor of syllables rise in your throat. For weeks, sentences seemed like brittle twigs, too fragile to carry weight, too sharp to hold without flinching. Now one ordinary word floats up like a bubble, maybe blue for the sky, or steam for the ribbon lifting from tea. The word rests on your tongue without burning. Something inside exhales, surprised. Language was never lost on their hidden. During crisis, Broca's and Wernicke's regions dimmed their lamps so metabolic fuel could sprint to muscles and pupils poised for danger. Speech is expensive, fear is urgent. But glial caretakers have patched torn axons, hippocampal weavers have sewn context into memory. The prefrontal lantern is relit, and the linguistic quarter of your cortex powers up like a street returning to life after blackout. You test a phrase aloud. The sound startles you with its gentleness, a deer stepping from brush. Air vibrates, laryngeal muscles, ears capture echo, superior temporal gyrus inspects melody for threat. Finding none, it forwards the signal to limbic gatekeepers, who nod. Another phrase arrives, longer, perhaps curious. Words, like migrating birds, settle on neural branches, strengthened by months of quiet growth. Neuroscientists call this functional reinstatement. Scans show language circuits, recoupling with anterior cingulate, once heart rate variability steadies. Calm creates budget for cognition. Oxygen spared from pounding pulse now feeds cortical columns that pass grammar and polish cadence. You feel the economics of it. Phrasing costs less effort, like writing on smooth parchment instead of bark. Vocabulary returns unevenly, as spring thaw exposes rocks before grass. Some terms drag, emotion ambulance, shatter, goodbye, speaking. Them tastes metallic. Yet naming transforms chemistry by articulating association. You move memory from sensory thicket to narrative clearing where prefrontal insight can walk around it. Decide placement. Psychologists label this affect labeling, and data confirm. Its power amygdala fires less when feeling is named. You practice in a journal, matching ink to heartbeat. Sentences break mid-stride, but soon they link subject, verb, object threads across ravine. Written language gives seconds to choose nuance. Hand movement engages cerebellar timing, anchoring story in muscle rhythm. Spoken narrative follows. You phone a friend, voice shaking like new leaves. Mirror neurons in their promoter cortex fire in empathy, and warmth travels back through tone. Dialogue becomes co-regulation. Linguistic exchange doubles as cardiovascular sync, heartbeats, edging toward shared tempo. Therapists leverage this coupling. Exposure sessions invite incremental retelling while breathing slow. Studies show, as story gains structure, sympathetic spikes fade. Repetition moves memory from episodic volatility into semantic steadiness. Still important, no longer explosive. Metaphor offers safe light that doesn't blind. Calling panic an over-eager guard dog lets prefrontal cortex negotiate with amygdala kennelmaster. Brain imaging reveals metaphor recruits right hemisphere networks, distributing load away from scarred circuits. Poetry becomes adaptive architecture, not decoration. If you know another language, it provides parallel pathways. Recounting in a second tongue reduces limbic charge. Later, translation back integrates healing into core identity. Reading aloud returns 2 lines from Mary Oliver or Rumi resonate through chest. Synchronizing auditory and default mode networks, fostering self-compassion. Group storytelling circles magnify gains. As you speak, listeners' brains entrain to your rhythm. Oxytocin swells, binding trust to narrative content. The word we starts appearing in your tale. Sliding identity from isolated survivor to member of resurgent tribe. Progress is not linear. Some days words vanish, throat tightening. You learn to spot precursors, jaw stiffening, breath shortening, and pivot to non-verbal expression. Sketch, hum, sway. These keep channels open until speech pathways reboot. Technology helps. Voice memos catch thoughts on walks. Text-to-speech mirrors phrases back. Chatbots offer rehearsal without pressure. Nutrition matters. Tyrosine and folate support. Dopamine routes vital for lexical retrieval. Hydration ensures ionic gradients. Balanced caffeine sharpens without jitter. As vocabulary rebuilds, nuance returns. You separate sadness from melancholy, anger from indignation, anxiety from anticipatory energy. Alexithymia fades. Inner colors become distinct pencils instead of muddy chalk. Articulation grants choice. You soothe sadness differently than stress, joy differently than relief. Tense shifts to early narrative lived in present. I am still there. Now past emerges. It happened. Occasionally future lights, horizon. I will be okay. Verb changes show timeline restored. Possibility reopened. Humor slips inner joke about hospital food. An exaggerated mimic of bureaucracy. Laughter splashes the prefrontal cortex with endorphins, signaling play and safety. Language becomes wind through chimes. Proof of restored aliveness. Boundaries become linguistic acts. I'm not ready to discuss that honoring nervous system pace. Each respectful reception deposits relational capital, tempting narration to deepen. Ritual speech underscores progress. Chanting Om, whispering prayer, reciting mantra vibrates vagus nerve, steadies respiration. Whether spiritual or secular, voiced truth purges and fortifies. Storytelling medicine shows cancer patients who craft coherent narratives mount stronger immune responses. Perhaps the immune brain eavesdrops on meaning. You notice small colds. Shorten as words bloom comforting, coincidental, or both. Set your story to melody, and hippocampal place cells navigate through tune, ensuring recall even if years erode other paths. Singing your saga is a lighthouse against future fog. Eventually, you translate body signals into social language. When chest tightens, you say, I feel apprehensive. Needs get met, arousal drops. Biology becomes dialogue. Dialogue shapes biology. Mentor roles appear. You teach coping vocabulary to others, reinforcing your own maps. Silence retains value. You alternate verbal waves with quiet pools beneath trees, letting psyche digest. Tonight, before sleep, you whisper gratitude for syllables regained. The words cross corpus callosum, echo in both hemispheres, then descend as warm vagal tide. In gut, harmony loops, readying you for the next chapter where neurons stretch beyond familiar borders, reaching for connection. You sit on a quiet porch, dusk stroking the horizon like a painter blending blues into violets, and you sense something subtle inside, an almost musical rustle, as though cables within your skull are being tuned. Every few breaths a faint inner click arrives, followed by warmth, then hush. These barely felt shifts are not imagination. They are the slow miracle of reconnection. Billions of neuronal attempts to clasp hands across spaces that trauma once tore wide. A single neuron is a pilgrim of possibility. Its cell body basks in metabolic light, while a long axon stretches outward, tipped with a growth cone that sniffs chemical gradients like a seedling seeking sun. When a dendrite from another neuron lies somewhere ahead, the growth cone extends Philopodius lender feelers laden with adhesion molecules. If the local chemistry says welcome, membranes dock, vesicles flood synaptic cleft with neurotransmitters, and a bridge is born. The first pulses cross, tentative as strangers exchanging names. Then, if both partners fire within milliseconds of one another, molecular signals strengthen the bond damper receptors embed. Scaffolding proteins snap into place. Astrocytic feet tighten around the junction. Long-term potentiation, the gold standard of neural marriage registers. After trauma, these pilgrimages slow. Cortisol prunes dendritic spines. Microglia remove weakened synapses. Myelin sheaths thin. Once busy boulevards become dusty lanes. The brain does this triage to conserve energy for survival. Better a few vital highways than many vulnerable footpaths. Yet life after danger needs complexity. To plan, dream, empathize, create, you require a network again. And so, as fear circuits subside and nutrients flow, reconnection begins, modest. At first, then rhythmic. You experience it as flickers of clarity, remembering the second verse of a favorite song, tasting cinnamon in oatmeal, feeling sudden gratitude for a stranger's smile. Each flicker is a courier delivering proof that two or more circuits have just re-established link. Neuroscientists measure the phenomenon by tracking spontaneous network synchrony. Electroencephalography reveals phase locking between distant cortical hubs, increasing week by week. You feel it not as voltage, but as coherence. A thought no longer stalls mid-sentence. A feeling arrives with name attached. At the biochemical level, neurotrophins lead the dance. Brain-derived factor BDNF levels, suppressed by stress, now rise with exercise, sunlight, music, storytelling. BDNF binds to TRKB receptors, activating MAPK cascades that prompt gene transcription, genes coding for synapsons, ion channels, cytoskeletal scaffolds. Within minutes, axonal transport ferries fresh supplies to budding tips. Microtubules extend. Mitochondria queue along shafts to power growth, and membrane vesicles prime for fusion. Glial friends assist. Astrocytes release cholesterol-rich particles essential for synapse maturation. Oligodendrocyte precursor cells watch axonal firing, and wrap those with promising future in thickening myelin, reducing propagation delay. Microglia, Once warriors, shift into gardeners, spraying anti-inflammatory cytokines, pruning only excess sprouts so that network stays efficient. Their pruning follows the Hebbian adage, cells that fire together wire tighter. Those out of sync stand apart, yet rebuilding is not copy and paste. New bridges form by reading current needs, not historic maps. Circuits processing safety now weave more densely with executive regions, giving prefrontal cortex swift access to soothe limbic fires. Pathways linking visual cortex to parietal body schema areas strengthen, aiding mindfulness of present surroundings instead of replaying past flashbacks. In children, early adversity sometimes rewards circuitry toward vigilance. But adult neuroplasticity can soften such detours, rooting curiosity back toward play and learning. Therapy provides structured blueprints. In exposure therapy, revisiting feared memory while breathing slow pairs amygdala activation with prefrontal appraisal, synapses carrying the paired signal, insight protein kinase, M-zeta, consolidating new control loops. In EMDR, bilateral eye movements generate rhythmic pulses through superior colliculus to hippocampus, nudging memory fragments into integrative slots. Body-based therapies like yoga and tai chi coordinate proprioceptive input with insular awareness, aligning interoceptive and exteroceptive maps. Community accelerates conversation synchronizes Broca-Wernicke arcs with mirror neuron circuits in listeners. Laughter bursts gamma oscillations across auditory and premotor cortices. Eye contact triggers release of neuromodulators dopamine, oxytocin histinocytylating, signals that open chromatin near synapse-building genes. Even brief supportive touch elevates endocannabinoids that fine-tune synaptic transmission. Healing networks thus bloom in relational soil. Consider creativity's role. When you paint, motor plans in premotor cortex converse with color memory in inferotemporal regions, while emotion pulses from limbic vaults color brushstroke force. The triple conversation wires dorsal attention, default mode, and salience networks. Functional MRI shows increased nodal efficiency after weeks of art practice. Music, too, recruits bilateral auditory cortices, cerebellar timing centers, and right inferior frontal gyrus into a superhighway orchestra. Each rehearsal session lays metronomic scaffolds for precise cross-regional timing. Movement fosters physical connection that parallels neural bridging. Jumping synapses mirror jumping feet plyometric exercises, release IGF-1, crossing blood-brain barrier, activating PI3K pathways that prompt dendritic spine density increase. Walking in nature modulates anterior cingulate theta, harmonizing internal states with sensory flow. Even micro-movements, rolling shoulders, stretching fingers send proprioceptive afferents through dorsal columns to gracile and cuneate nuclei, gating thalamic filters that decide which bodily data the cortex receives. Nutrition supplies raw timber. Omega-3 fatty acids integrate into synaptic membranes, enhancing fluidity. Flavonoids from berries accumulate in hippocampus, promoting LTP. Prebiotic fibers feed gut bacteria that secrete butyrate, inhibiting histone destylase and widening epigenetic space for growth genes. Sleep glues pieces together, slow wave phases drive system-wide replay. REM adds emotional dye. Microglia clear remodeling debris. All these factors converge on one outcome: connectivity, metrics, climb. Graph theory analysis reveals higher global efficiency, clustering coefficients, rebalance modularity restores. Subjectively, you feel it as returning self, a constellation of memories, hopes, quirks, boundaries, where once you were shards, now patterns glimmer, but reconnection is fragile. A sharp stressor can dislodge new spines before they stabilize. That's why patience is mantra. Research suggests newly formed synapses need about 4 weeks of consistent practice to cement. Myelin requires months. You protect growth with routine, daily gentle exercise, regular sleep, nourishing meals, mindful check-ins. Gentleness extends to setbacks. When anxiety spikes, instead of labeling regression, treat it as network testing under load. Deep breaths lower sympathetic noise, giving prefrontal circuits time to reroute. Each recovery reinforces resilience. Error-based learning sharpens precision. Imagination also scaffolds networks, yet unbuilt. Guided visualization recruits precuneus and medial prefrontal cortices, simulating future scenarios. Studies show athletes enhancing motor performance through mental rehearsal alone. You can rehearse calm conversations, confident decisions, creative endeavors. The brain encodes simulation, much like action, prelaying synaptic rails. Writing offers blueprint and evidence. Journaling feelings engages dorsolateral cortex to order narrative. Hippocampus to timestamp. Ventromedial cortex to assign value. Reading entries later proves growth-linked markers, where once blank despair sprawled. Neuroimaging shows autobiographical coherence correlates with white matter, integrity in uncinate fasciculus, linking frontal and temporal lobes. Modality matters, but presence matters more. Any activity done with curious attention becomes a synaptogenic exercise. Chopped vegetables and notice knife rhythm. Walk and count footsteps. Breathe and follow exhale to belly's end. Attention floods engaged circuits with acetylcholine, sharpening plastic windows. Eventually, the miracle extends beyond you. Empathy circuits rewire to perceive subtle cues in others. Assign mirror neuron nets regained bandwidth. Having regained internal trust, you lend surplus to relationships. Social ties deepen. Community lattice thickens. Sociologists find post-growth often manifests as increased altruism. Still, identity is mosaic. Some tiles lost forever, others darker, cracked. Reconnection does not restore innocence. It integrates complexity. The self that emerges accepts scars as seams binding disparate patches into quilt. Neuroscience echoes. Neurons rarely reconnect to identical partners. Instead, they seek adjacent survivors, forging detours around damage, creating unique circuits never before seen in any brain. On certain evenings, you may feel tingling behind eyes, a mild ache across scalp, as if a crown too small has been lifted. That ache may be glial swelling around fresh architectures, temporary scaffolds, thickening extracellular matrix. Hydrate, rest. Growth spurts consume resources. Reconnection expands beyond cortex into brainstem and spinal pattern generators. Posture unwinds, gait smoothens, voice pitch steadies. Friends notice, lighter laugh, eyes shining. They comment you seem more you. What they see are embodied echoes of synaptic bridges forming deep in reticular formation, basal ganglia. Cerebellum.technology confirms progress. EG shows increased alpha-theta coupling. MEG depicts hub shifts from stress-centric salience, network, to flexible frontoparietal control. DTI reveals radial diffusivity, decreasing in anterior limb of internal capsule. But you confirm through mornings risen without dread. Afternoons alive with curiosity, nights where dreams settle into story rather than storm. One neuron still fails to connect. Another overshoots target. The dance continues. Trial, error, triumph. Patience as conductor waves baton at tempo of biology, not impatience. Healing, like dawn, doesn't hurry yet, never stops, soon. Circuits of identity will weave these bridges into coherent whole. The next chapter meets that threshold, how memory, emotion, language, and body conspire to assemble a new mosaic, luminous with fractures turned into lines of gold. You sit by a small lamp in the hush before dawn, noticing how shadows pool in the lines of your open palm. The hand feels familiar and yet oddly new, as though someone quietly retuned the bones during sleep. That sensation, half wonder and half uncertainty, signals that the work of reassembly has crossed a threshold. The pieces know one another again. Now the task is to decide what their reunion means. Identity is often spoken of as if it were a single sculpture. Chip away at the marble and the form appears, finished for all time. Neuroscience reveals a different art. The mind is mosaics layered atop mosaics. Tesserae rearranged whenever experience smashes a section or discovery offers fresh hues. Trauma scattered many tiles, some lost, some warped, some merely buried. Healing begins by sorting fragments into piles. Memory, value, sensation, dream. Only later does the act of design emerge, when the nervous system trusts the space enough to choose colors and curves. Your hippocampus provides the ledger, itemizing events in temporal order so the new picture includes when things occurred, not only that they did. The amygdala adds pigments of feeling, tinting certain shards with fear, others with relief, a few with the first blush of joy. The prefrontal cortex plans the arrangement, holding possibilities in working memory while eliminating those that clash. Glial cells supply more to cholesterol, lactate, growth factors that hardens into a subtle sense of continuity. Yet none of these artisans can see the whole wall. For that, you rely on the default mode network, a constellation of midline structures that lights up when the external world grows quiet. During restful mind-wandering, it superimposes imagined futures onto remembered pasts, searching for sequences that feel both true and bearable. If a draft looks promising, salient circuits tag it with dopamine, inspiring curiosity. If a draft threatens overwhelm, noradrenaline nudges consciousness elsewhere, protecting delicate gains until strength returns. Such iterations can last months. You witness them in shifting pronouns of your journal. At first I appears distant, then tentatively present, then solid enough to carry verbs of agency. Linguists call this narrative stabilization. Brain scans align. Increased coupling between medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate indicates a story taking root. When that coupling falters perhaps after a sleepless night, revert to fragments, proof the mosaic remains malleable. Throughout, the body offers veto power, a posture that once expressed vigilance now pinches nerves. Standing differently recruits new muscles and, with them, new metaphors. Proprioceptive feedback from the parietal cortex informs the narrative council that the citizenry of joints and tendons vote for ease, not armor. As fascia loosens, the story zones devoted to threat shrink a little, making room for chapters about play. Culture supplies tiles too. Songs, idioms, rituals, and shared myths slide into empty spaces, giving personal episodes a communal border. Anthropologists describe identity as a braid of personhood and belonging. Neuroscience supports the braid. Mirror neuron systems fire when you echo your friend's slang, weaving social fibers into private tapestry. Trauma often frays these chords, isolating you in dialects of alarm. Reconnection resplices them, language by language, hug by hug. Memory remains selective. Some shards no longer fit. The brain does not throw them away, but files them in dim archives along ventrolateral prefrontal shelves. You can retrieve them if necessary. Meanwhile, the mosaic losses their absence with acceptance. This graceful omission is not denial. It is curvature guiding gaze toward patterns that sustain growth. Occasionally, a bright piece appears from nowhere, childhood scent, a half-forgotten ambition, and snaps into place with audible internal click. These moments feel like destiny, but are really evidence of association networks gaining reach. As dendrites lengthen, they intersect remote nodes, surfacing data previously stranded. Each recovered tile widens the palette, letting the emerging image reveal depth rather than mere repair. A crucial stage arrives when the narrative declares new principles. Perhaps the old identity worshipped certainty. Now flexibility rises as core virtue. Genes do not rewrite, yet epigenetic marks adjust enzyme thresholds so prefrontal inhibition relaxes around ambiguity. You find yourself smiling at questions that once induced panic. Philosophers call this second navit, not return to innocence, but advance to seasoned openness. Meanwhile, reward circuits recalibrate. During trauma, they fused satisfaction with adrenaline, confusing relief for pleasure. Healing separates the channels, allowing dopamine to accompany curiosity instead of escape. Practices like mindful savoring reinforce the new alignment. Tasting strawberry sets off nucleus accumbens without summoning hypervigilance. Over time, the system trusts that sweetness need not forecast danger. As the mosaic nears coherence, myelination increases along major narrative tracks, finishing strokes. Oligodendrocytes wrap gossiping axons, speeding recollection of who you were becoming. Retrieval bias shifts. When asked about life, you recall not solely the break, but also the weave. Psychologists measure this as increased ratio of redemptive sequences in life stories, correlated with well-being. Yet the work remains a conversation. Each dawn, sensory input offers fresh tesserae. Some mornings, a headline cracks a section. Some evenings, laughter sets a jewel. The brain stays ready, with tools, pruning, shears, glue, pigments of mood. Neural plasticity ensures no grout hardens beyond amendment. This flexibility is resilience, the ability to remake coherence under changing light. Spiritual traditions intuit this. They speak of dying to old selves, being reborn in compassion. Neuroscience converts the poetry into synaptic diagrams, but honors the gist. Transformation arises from iterative letting go. In meditation, posterior cingulate quiets, loosening grip on autobiographical loops. Simultaneously, insular awareness brightens, anchoring identity in present sensation rather than remembered wound. Technology now aids the craft. Neurofeedback reveals networks in real time. Virtual reality rehearses safe embodiment. Genetic tests hint at dietary tweaks for neurotransmitter balance. Yet tools matter less than intention. Mosaics respond to patient curiosity, the willingness to ask, what happens if this shard shifts there? Every gentle experiment invites BDNF to the workspace. Support circles mirror the mosaic back. Friends notice new colors you overlook. reflecting sunlight onto tiles still drying. Their eyewitness accounts strengthen frontal limbic pathways, endorsing positive change. Social neurobiology demonstrates that ventromedial cortex codes social approval as physiological safety. Thus, community validation becomes neural sealant. Inevitably, doubts surface. Is the picture authentic or merely stitched illusion? Here, the vestibular sense of inner alignment offers litmus. When story and sensation accord, a settling spreads from gut to crown parasympathetic sigh. Drop of shoulders, pupils opening to gather more light. Discrepancy feels like static. The body, again, is compass. By now the reconstruction includes foresight. You imagine future rooms, roles, mornings. Prospection activates hippocampal scenes patched together from recombined past elements, proving the mosaic extends in time as well as space. Plans no longer trigger dread. They spark orientation. Psychologists term approach motivation. Approach demands boundaries. The mosaic needs frame. You practice saying no, and each refusal lays a border tile lined in firm color. Overlaps where old patterns invite self-betrayal are flagged by anterior cingulate as conflict. Honoring the flag paves conduction lines. 4. Integrity. Eventually, decision cost drops, replaced by declarative ease. Creativity flourishes. The more quietly consistent the network, the bolder the ideas it permits. Default mode and executive networks enter harmonious coupling, enabling insight. A poem arrives, or design sketch, echoing mosaic motif. Making art externalizes internal pattern, letting your eyes confirm its coherence. Feedback loops tighten. Sometimes, grief returns, streaking across tiles like sudden rain. Grout softens under tears, but nothing collapses. You learn to let sorrow rinse dust, then dab the surface dry. Such maintenance proves durability. Deep sleep that evening seals progress. Sharp wave ripples carry the updated narrative into cortical storage, while REM mixes emotional tones so newly laid patterns resist brittleness. In the morning, you wake earlier than the alarm, surprised by rested buoyancy. This physiological ease is not luxury. It is scaffolding for forthcoming challenge. For Chapter 15's endless healing rhythm, identity reassembled now faces the horizon of open water, how to sustain reparative motion beyond acute recovery, how to keep plasticity alive without constant crisis. The cerebellum stands ready, fine-tuning predictions as you practice novel tasks, learning a language, gardening, mentoring another traveler. Each error signal it corrects is a siding added to the railway of self, ensuring cargo of wisdom reaches distant stations. Moreover, hormonal systems sync to the new cadence. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis adopts lower resting tone, freeing anabolic cascades. Testosterone and estrogen recalibrate, affecting motivation and relational attunement. Thyroid rhythms smooth, bringing metabolic steadiness. Physically, you notice hair glossier, skin brighter. Digestion chimera-embodied markers that internal mosaic shines through external canvas. Even immune memory updates. Regulatory T cells expand, tempering overzealous microglial alerts. Autoantibody titers drop, aligning with studies linking psychological integration to immune tolerance. Healing the narrative softens the body's civil wars. Financial and environmental choices shift as well. You allocate resources toward enrichment books, hiking shoes, therapy sessions, declining quick numbing purchases. This shift is dopaminergic thrift, guided by orbitofrontal valuations now tuned to long-term benefit. Carbon footprint shrinks as impulsive consumption fades, showing identity reassembly touches planetary mosaic to dot in relationships. Attachment style evolves. Internal working models stored in medial prefrontal cortex recalibrate. Secure base scripts rewrite, permitting intimacy without engulfment. Partners, friends, or family sense that you listen with deeper presence, speak with firmer yet flexible core. Mirrored in their nervous systems, your coherence begets theirs. A ripple of regulated connectivity expanding outward. Artifacts of past self do lingural photos, trophies, debts. Encountering them sends nostalgia through lateral temporal cortex. Yet you no longer confuse artifact with essence. Instead, you greet each relic like a museum visitor, honoring but not relocating into the exhibit. This mature distancing reflects strengthened dorsolateral prefrontal governance over memory retrieval. Every so often, new trauma may strike: a loss, a sudden illness, societal upheaval. But mosaic wisdom remembers the craft. The first cracks are triaged swiftly, support networks activate, coping rituals deploy. The magnitude of derailment shortens, because the system has stored algorithms for repair. Much like immune memory neutralizes previously encountered pathogens. Researchers describe this process as stress, inoculation, moderate adversity followed by successful adaptation primes circuits. For future resilience, your life now exemplifies the model. EEG reveals faster resynchronization after startle. Heart rate variability rebounds within minutes. Cortisol peaks lower. Functionally, you have built shock absorbers into the identity ride. At the philosophical layer, existential questions emerge. If identity is plastic, what anchors meaning? The answer arises from embodied ethics, patterns that minimize harm, maximize compassion, and foster creativity, maintain stability even as form shifts. Neuroscience finds correlates in ventromedial encoding of moral values persisting across reappraisals, suggesting ethical continuity underlies narrative mutability. Spirituality too might sprout anew, perhaps not in old dogmas but in felt sense of interbeing. Parietal lobe's representation of boundaries softens during meditation, producing unity experiences. Such moments etch awe into limbic memory, offering axis of significance around which mosaic tiles revolve without scattering. With identity mosaic largely coherent, attention turns outward to service. Ventral striatum now lights up at acts of kindness rather than self-soothing. Volunteer work, mentorship, activism become natural extensions, reinforcing feedback loops of purpose that further stabilize self. Technology continues to assist, but also demands discernment. You curate digital environments, unfollow triggers, subscribe to nourishing voices. Prefrontal filters intercept clickbait, cortisol spikes, preserving calm connectivity. Online communities supplement but do not replace tactile human presence, maintaining sensory motor, grounding essential for integration. In art, you notice recurring motifs, spirals, bridges, seeds, visual affirmations of neural design language. Sharing these pieces, you witness resonance in viewers, verifying that private mosaic speaks archetypal dialect understood across nervous systems. Collective healing through art is not metaphor. Mirror system activation proves neuronal empathy. Bridging skulls. As months flow into years, some tiles fade. Memories lose detail. lessons condense into gist. The brain's semanticization process moves specifics from hippocampus to neocortex, freeing indexing space for new adventures. This streamlining is graceful aging of identity, varnish deepening. Hughes. Late one evening, sitting again on a porch, now overlooking different season, you recall the initial fracture. Distance lends perspective. Pain still exists, but no longer defines borders. You marvel at journey's fractal geometry, each repair contained miniature patterns mirroring whole. Gratitude arises, releasing oxytocin that quiets amygdala still further. Closing a loop. Neuroscience suggests gratitude practice thickens ventral medial areas, cementing positivity bias. Your lived data corroborate. You sleep easier, dream richer. Wake willing, so, tonight, before you drift to sleep, place a hand over the heartbeat that guided reconstruction. Feel the cadence, steady, learned, humble. Whisper a promise to keep tending the mosaic, dusting tiles, welcoming new shards when seasons dictate. The whisper vibrates through bone, enters cochlea, loops back to auditory cortex as vow recorded in neural ink. Fireflies answer outside. In that gentle conversation between filament and insect, you recognize symbol. The brain never glows alone. It matches brightness with world around you. And as you exhale, you wonder how this quiet rhythm will keep reshaping you in night still. To come, night drifts toward quiet dawn, and you awaken to a gentle certainty. The work inside your skull did not cease while you slept. In the stillness between heartbeats, billions of cells murmured, signaling, pruning, reinforcing, healing. You realize is not a single surge but an endless cadence, like tides reshaping shorelines grain by grain. Even now, after months of repair and renewal, the brain continues its slow dance of adjustment, forever weaving resilience into the fabric of living tissue. You notice first, in the smallest moments, the way a sudden car horn startles you less than before, the ease with which you remember why the horn sounded and why you were safe, the faint smile that arrives unprompted when a breeze lifts your hair. Each subtle shift testifies to microscopic alterations on channels, opening more smoothly, glial lattice thickening, synapses lighting in new constellations that reroute fear into curiosity. The biological engines of this ongoing mending are tireless microglia patrol nightly, converting from vigilant sentinels to gentle recyclers, nibbling at weak spines and secreting growth factors that invite stronger bridges. Astrocytes expand calcium waves that synchronize distant neurons, creating pockets of harmony where chaos once echoed. Oligodendrocyte progenitors scan axons for signals of fresh purpose and then wrap them with new myelin, trimming milliseconds off every thought so cognition feels crisper and emotion travels with steadier pace. Deep within your brainstem, the locus coeruleus calibrates its pulses of norepinephrine, learning to whisper rather than shout. This modulation steadies attention, granting you space to notice details previously blurred by hypervigilance. The layered chirps in morning birdsong, the slow swirl of tea leaves sinking, the warmth of sunlit fabric against forearm skin. Each observation is a reinforcement. Loop sensory cortex reports pleasure. Reward circuits emit dopamine. Prefrontal centers encode the experience for future recall. Hormonal rhythms, too, adopt gentler curves. Cortisol still rises with dawn, yet its peak is modest, allowing oxytocin to co-broadcast messages of trust. The hypothalamic pituitary axis, once overclocked, now behaves like a well-tuned pendulum clock, swinging with predictable grace. As endocrine storms calm, gastrointestinal tissue heals, immune cells allocate fewer resources to inflammation, and even hair follicles echo serenity in their sheen. Epigenetic marks continue to shift. Methyl groups detach from promoters that once silenced growth genes. Acetyl groups settle onto histone tails, loosening chromatin so transcription can proceed with fluidity. Lifestyle, choices, sleep, laughter, nutritious meals serve as scribes editing this chemical manuscript. The story they write favors neuroplastic openness, preparing circuits to learn, adapt, and flourish across future seasons. Sleep, that nightly architect, refines yesterday's remodeling plans during deep, slow wave passes, then tests them in REM dress rehearsals. You may dream of walking unfamiliar paths or tinkering with peculiar devices, though narrative seems whimsical. Hippocampal replay and cortical experimentation are stress testing new memory maps, ensuring structural integrity before daylight returns. Daytime movement supplements nocturnal labor. Each stretch, step, and sway delivers proprioceptive telegrams that cerebellar maps translate into incremental refinements of coordination. Aerobic pulses coax endothelial cells to release nitric oxide, dilating vessels that nourish the default mode hub, the executive network, the salient circuit. Movement thus becomes dialogue. You speak through muscle. The brain replies in protein. Synthesis. Learning keeps the cycle vibrant. When you pick up a new instrument or language, dendrites sprout thorny excrescences, seeking partners in distant lobes. Practice stimulates BDNF fountains, and repetition bakes skill into robust wiring. Even reading this sentence nudges microcircuits, threading visual inputs to semantic warehouses and emotional filters. Knowledge is nutrition. Curiosity is exercise. Integration is reward. Resilience accrues through oscillatory balance. Meditation slows cortical chatter into rhythmic alpha, giving somatosensory regions a chance to recalibrate thresholds. Breathwork entrains heart rate variability, linking sinoatrial pacemaker to vagal supervisors. The resonance between chest and cortex builds a scaffolding upon which future stress will climb but not conquer, because the structure sways instead of snapping. Setbacks still arrive unexpected: grief, illness, global unrest. Each challenge triggers a flare of sympathetic arousal, yet recovery proves faster. Researchers call this stress response efficiency. The amplitude may spike, but area under the curve shrinks. Your lived experience matches data. You weep, tremble, or brood, but soon ground yourself, using the tools now ingrained. Naming, feeling, lengthening, exhale, seeking kind eyes. The brain interprets rapid stabilization as proof of capacity, reinforcing circuits that favor composure. Community engagement extends internal healing outward. Conversations stimulate theory of mind regions. Mutual projects synchronize motor and prefrontal rhythms. Acts of service fire reward centers in ways self-focused pleasure never could, releasing oxytocin that sweeps through bloodstream to quiet inflammatory genes. The social brain thrives on contribution. Purpose becomes another layer of armor. Against despair, aging enters the dialogue. Yet modern neuroscience reframes age not as decline, but redistribution. Some synapses fade, freeing metabolic budget for others to specialize. Crystallized knowledge condenses in temporal cortices, ready to assist younger networks tackling novel situations. Meanwhile, adult neurogenesis slower persists, especially in enriched environments you deliberately cultivate with art, nature, and laughter. Technology whispers possibilities. Neurofeedback headsets displaying frontal midline theta. Apps guiding polyvagal drills. Virtual reality therapies rehearsing calm in simulated storms. Tools are merely extensions. The principal artisan remains. The living brain deciding daily where to allocate plasticity, what stories to highlight, which habits to retire. Even silence, partners in progress. Quiet walks devoid of media allow the default mode network to consolidate insight, linking disparate memories into creative solutions. Research shows that microdoses of stargazing, waterfall watching reduce activity in the inferior parietal lobule, diminishing self-rumination. In these pauses, previously competing neural coalitions negotiate truce, yielding a clearer internal parliament. Throughout this ongoing evolution, identity feels both stable and open-ended. You recognize signature gestures, humor, moral compass, yet you also sense hidden rooms ready to furnish. That paradox is the hallmark of a healing brain, coherence plus capacity. Electroencephalography might display it as increased network integration, without loss of modular diversity. In language, it sounds like I am enough and I am still becoming. The cerebellum subtly manages the cadence. Once relegated to motor control, it is now known to sculpt cognitive timing, ensuring thoughts land in useful order. Its predictive algorithms learn from every outcome, updating priors about how long emotions last, how soon relief follows effort, because predictions grow more accurate. Anxiety and mismatch between expectation and experience, tomesis. The adaptive benefit of mild stress spices the recipe. Cold showers, challenging puzzles. Heartfelt conversations push circuits slightly beyond comfort, triggering repair cascades that overshoot, leaving you stronger. Yet you honor balance, alternating push with rest, challenge with celebration, imagination. Projects healing into future decades. You picture yourself mentoring, adventuring, perhaps mastering a craft still unknown. Mental imagery recruits prefrontal and parietal nodes, encoding roadmap neurons will follow. Studies show visualization increases motor skill acquisition. Here it serves as existential rehearsal, positioning hope as physiological directive. Neuroscientists sometimes debate whether the brain wants anything. Observation suggests, yes, it wants predictive accuracy, metabolic efficiency, social connection. Healing furthers all three. Accurate prediction lowers surprise. Efficiency conserves energy. Connection secures resources and meaning. Therefore, the brain's never-ending repair is not altruistic or cosmetic, it is central to biological imperative. Late in the evening, you rest again, palm over heart, and recall early moments of trauma recovery when exhaustion felt permanent. Contrast sharpens gratitude. Now fatigue signals rest rather than despair. Sadness prompts reach rather than retreat. Each healthy response embodies synaptic wisdom. In dreamless depths, glymphatic rivers will soon surge, carrying away today's molecular refuse, leaving space for dawn. You know this cycle intimately now. Its rhythm is lullaby and drumbeat, whisper and oath. The brain never stops healing, and so neither do you. Glia engage in subtle debates about synaptic quotas, issuing cytokine ballots that instruct neurons when to scale back excitation. This process, called homeostatic plasticity, prevents runaway circuits that could otherwise kindle anxiety or mania. You witness its clinical echo when mood swings flatten into more navigable swells. Even on turbulent days, the amplitude stays. Within shorelines, you now trust. Deep genetic custodians participate too. Inside nuclei, enzymes of base excision repair patrol for oxidative lesions in DNA, snipping faults and patching with pristine nucleotides. Under chronic stress, those crews once lagged, allowing micromutations to accumulate. Reduced inflammation and steadier redox balance free them to catch up. Longevity researchers link such vigilance to lower risk of neurodegenerative drift. Later in life, for you, diligent repair manifests as steadier recall of words and names. As well as sharper morning focus, your sensory world grows richer. Olfactory bulbs, once numbed by cortisol, now decode the layered terroir of morning coffee, the mineral edge in rain-soaked pavement. Visual cortex discriminates color gradients more finely because retinal dopamine metabolism has normalized. Sharpening signal to noise, sound gains depth. You hear harmonics in familiar songs that eluded wounded attention. These perceptual gifts feed back into emotion, giving limbic centers more data for nuanced appraisal. Steering mood with subtler reins, the spinal cord, often overlooked, joins the conversation. Central pattern generators governing gait adapt to distribute load evenly, reducing micro-injuries and sending ascending messages of competence. Each confident stride pumps cerebrospinal fluid, reinforcing glymphatic clearance and flow. This reciprocal loop between locomotion and cognition explains why walking ideas into existence feels effortless. The act itself primes networks for insight. Dream content mirrors integration. Early nightmares of fragmentation have softened into symbolic odysseys. You cross bridges over calm rivers, assemble broken instruments into orchestras, guide lost children toward lantern-lit homes. Dream therapy studies confirm such narrative maturation correlates with waking resilience. Because the pontine tegmentum's scripts borrow from hippocampal models of safety now updated with real-world successes, technology's landscape will inevitably change augmented realities, brain-computer interfaces, perhaps pharmacological enhancers of plasticity. The principles remain. The brain evaluates risk and potential, adapts gradually, and yearns for authenticity. When future tools beckon, you will consult the somatic barometer inside. If breath shortens and shoulders rise, step back. If chest opens and curiosity hums, perhaps step forward. Environmental stewardship takes on neurological relevance. Research on nature exposure shows that forests increase natural killer cell activity and parietal calm. Ocean vistas entrain. Midline alpha, reducing rumination. Protecting such spaces therefore safeguards communal nervous systems, including yours. Activism becomes self-care scaled to planet. Spirituality, whether rooted in tradition or personal philosophy, supplies metamap stories of origin, meaning, and belonging. Meditative prayer increases gamma coherence between frontal and occipital lobes, synchronizing vision with intention. Ritual breath brings temporal cortex, rhythmic context, letting existential fears transmute into awe. You discover that neural networks crave narratives larger than individual lifespan. When provided, default mode reflections grow more gracious. The marvel is not perpetual ascent, but dynamic harmony. Some days, fatigue, grief, or anger will crest, and elimination will feel incomplete. These valleys remind endocrine and immune actors to refine their scripts. You accept fluctuation as symphony, not flaw. Crescendos need diminuendos. Tissues need load and release. Minds need both question and silence. Scientists call such cyclical optimization allostatic orchestration. You call it living. In friendly conversations, you begin to mentor others, sharing breathing exercises, journaling prompts, and the radical permission to rest. Each teaching moment strengthens your circuitry by re-experiencing early lessons through new lenses. The brain's mirror system validates your growth, echoing in pupils of the listener, forging dyads of co-regulation. One evening you pause on a hilltop trail, watching satellites slip across twilight. Starfields once induced existential dread. Now they kindle kinship with vast rhythms. Astrocytes in visual cortex coordinate pulses that align with heartbeats, a neural reflection of cosmic pulse. You feel both small and bonded, a node in a shimmering galactic net. Researchers examining ore states observe decreased activity in default mode regions tied to self-referential processing, increasing openness and generosity. Returning home, you donate time to a local garden, coax seedlings into soil, and see fractals of neurogenesis echoed in root webs. Such nested patterns assure you that healing inside your skull participates in ecosystems beyond. Genomic studies predict that future. Stressors will still leave epigenetic smudges, but your lived wisdom can buffer inheritance. Mindful gestation, nurturing environments, and secure attachment rewrite risk into opportunity across generations. Thus, your ongoing healing is ancestral gift. Late at night, reading by lamplight, you notice steady pulse in your temple. Each beat is glycemic equilibrium, vascular tone, synaptic release. You close the book, rest fingers there, and thank the unseen orchestra. The act of gratitude sends vagal waves toward heart, slowing rhythm another notch, and the ripple of calm sweeps cortex, readying dreams to do their work. All the while, the question hums, what might the next frontier of becoming look like? Somewhere beyond tonight's horizon, fresh circuits wait to bloomery, minding you that every dawn is an invitation to heal a little further and to wonder what new music the brain will choose to play.